Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Now, let me tell you a story. I used to think moving to the cabin would be peaceful, the kind of quiet where the loudest sound is the wind through the trees or the crackle of a fire. Grace loved it out here. Said the woods felt alive, like they were watching over us. I used to laugh that off. But after what happened, I don't laugh anymore. The ridge behind the cabin towered like a wall. Tall, thin pines cut into the sky, beautiful by day, but by night, it was different. Still heavy, like the world forgot how to breathe. I figured the unease was just my imagination, until that night on the porch. We were wrapped in a blanket under the stars. Grace was humming some old song from her childhood when she suddenly stopped mid-note. "Do you see that?" she whispered. I followed her gaze toward the ridge. At first, nothing. Then it moved something pale, slinking low to the ground, almost white in the starlight. Not a deer, too thin, limbs too long. Its motion was broken, like it didn't know how to walk. It paused, looked toward us. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it saw me. "It's just an animal," I said, trying to calm myself as much as Grace. "No," she murmured, "it's not." There was something in her voice, calm, reverent almost, that chilled me more than the thing itself. That night I barely slept. Every creak in the walls made me jump. Grace, meanwhile, seemed perfectly at ease. In the morning, I walked the property. At the edge of the clearing, I found it. A nest of broken branches, flattened, like something had been laying there. In the center, a spiral of bones, small, picked clean. Rabbits, maybe, but arranged intentionally. Grace just looked at it and said, "It's a gift." "From what?" "The forest," she said. That night it came closer. We were by the fire when Grace stood up and went to the window. "It's here," she said. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. Cold air punched into my lungs. There, at the edge of the clearing, it stood upright now, gaunt and pale with limbs too long, hands dangling past its knees. Still, watching, the light hit it and it flinched, snapping its head away like the beam burned. Then it dropped to all fours and skittered into the trees. When I turned back, Grace was still at the window, smiling. "It doesn't want to hurt us," she whispered. "It just wants to watch." That was the first time I felt truly afraid, not of the thing, but of her. She started spending more time outside, even barefoot in the cold, just watching, waiting. She said she saw it every day. She called it the Watcher. "It comes closer every time," she said. One night I woke to find her side of the bed empty. I found the porch door wide open. Snow tracked out into the trees. I followed them with a flashlight, heart pounding. Grace stood at the tree line, staring into the woods. "Grace," I called. "What are you doing?" She didn't turn. Her breath was calm, visible in the cold. "Do you hear it?" she asked. "Hear what?" "It's singing." I dragged her back inside. The next day she acted like nothing happened. Later I found a bundle of sticks tied with twine near the clearing. Human hair was woven into it. Her hair. Grace held it like it was sacred. "It's a gift," she said. I burned it. 3 nights later, I heard something on the roof. Footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Grace was gone again. the window open. She stood in the clearing, arms raised toward the ridge. And the thing, it was there, looming over her, its body contorted, its face a gaping black void. I ran, shotgun in hand. Fired once. It staggered. Fired again. It convulsed. I pulled Grace away as it let out a sound like metal scraping metal, then skittered back into the dark. Back inside, I barricaded the door. Grace didn't fight me. She whispered. It was beautiful. She stopped eating, barely spoke, stared out the window for hours, said we couldn't leave, said it wouldn't let us. I started hearing whispers, scratching at the windows. One night, Grace woke me. It's here. Scraping circled the cabin, then silence, then the door creaked open. The thing crawled inside, contorting to fit. It stood tall, eyeless, its face a void. It looked at me, and I felt it in my mind, in my thoughts. Grace screamed. I fired. It shrieked, a high, splitting sound, and recoiled. I grabbed Grace and ran out into the storm, into the trees. It chased us. I could feel it. She fell. I picked her up, got to the truck. We barely escaped. We didn't stop until the lights of town appeared. Grace whispered, "We can't go back." I nodded. We wouldn't. We packed what we could and left that place behind. But something still clings to us. Some nights I wake to the sound of Grace whispering in her sleep. Other nights I find her at the window, and I swear she's smiling, like she's waiting, like it never really left, like we brought it with us. I came up to the cabin to get away from everything. City noise, work stress, the divorce. My grandfather passed away 2 months ago, left the place to me in his will. I hadn't been up here since I was a kid. The property sits deep in the Cascades, an old hunting cabin miles from anything that even resembles civilization. No service, no neighbors, no distractions. It sounded like exactly what I needed. The first couple days were fine, quiet, peaceful. I split wood, made coffee over the gas stove, sat out on the deck and watched the trees sway like green ocean waves. There's a stillness to the forest up here, a kind of reverence you only feel when everything else is stripped away. But the peace didn't last. The first thing I noticed was the door to the storm cellar. It was chained shut. Now I remembered that cellar from childhood. My grandfather used to keep old tools and supplies down there, mason jars, traps, bags of lime and flour. He never had it locked before, but now it was bolted and chained with a rusted padlock. And the lock itself looked new, too new. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he'd locked it before winter and forgotten about it. But then I found his journal. It was tucked in the drawer by his cot, just a plain leather-bound notebook filled with tidy, almost obsessive handwriting. Most of it was just notes about weather, game activity, supply lists. But near the end, the entries got strange. Heard it again last night, underneath the floorboards. It doesn't come out when the lanterns are lit. Marked the trees again. It keeps wiping them away. I think it's getting bolder. 3 dead birds on the stoop this morning, arranged in a circle. They don't bleed when I touch them. I didn't know what to make of it. My grandfather was a sharp man, not prone to paranoia. But those last entries were dated just a week before he died. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about reading those words stirred up memories I didn't know I still had. Shadows moving outside the window. The way Grandpa used to whisper to himself when he thought I was asleep. I left the lantern on when I went to bed. Around 3 a.m. I heard something, not outside, not on the roof, below, a low, dragging noise, like someone shifting across dirt with their hands. I sat up in the cot, heart hammering. The noise stopped. I waited, then came a thud. From underneath the cabin floor, I grabbed the flashlight, crept to the living room, and stood above the trapdoor to the cellar. The chains were still tight. The lock still there, but something had scraped along the inside of the wood, as if fingernails or claws had dragged across it. I stayed awake until dawn. The light felt like salvation. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the property. The air was cold and still, the way it gets before snow. That's when I noticed something odd on the tree trunks, thin symbols carved into the bark in a precise pattern. They looked recent, fresh, not random graffiti either. These were deliberate, runic. I snapped pictures with my camera and returned to the cabin, flipping through my grandfather's journal again. Near the end, I found drawings, sketches of the same marks. Wards, he'd written, keep it from getting too close. That night, I lit every lantern I could find, still didn't sleep. Around 2:47 a.m., the wind died completely. The trees stood frozen. No bugs, no rustling, just the sound of my own breathing. Then the thumping began again, but this time it was heavier, pacing. Whatever was beneath the cabin wasn't just crawling anymore. It was walking. I pressed my ear to the floorboards. My breath fogged on the hardwood, and then, clear as day, I heard it breathe. Something was alive down there. I spent the next day trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, a raccoon den under the cabin. A bear even, though that made no sense with how tight the crawl space was. I nearly packed up to leave, but something about the journal kept me there. I felt like I owed it to my grandfather to see it through. That night I made a mistake. I opened the trapdoor. I waited until just before sunset. I unlocked the chain, lifted the creaking wood panel, and shone my flashlight down into the cellar dirt floor. Old shelves, jars, nothing out of place. But the air that wafted up was wrong. It smelled like rot and copper, like something old and wet and dying. I closed it again, locked it, sat up all night. At 3:13 a.m., I woke to the sound of the padlock snapping off. I leapt from the cot, flashlight in hand, and rushed to the trapdoor. The chain lay coiled on the ground like a dead snake. The door hung open by 2 inches. Something had come up. I backed away slowly, grabbed the hunting rifle from above the mantel, and trained it on the trapdoor. Nothing moved, until the light flickered. The lantern on the far wall dimmed, then flared. As if something was blocking it, I held my breath. Then I saw it, a hand, long, pale, segmented like a spider's leg, reaching up and curling around the edge of the trapdoor. I didn't wait. I fired. The blast lit the room like lightning. The thing vanished down into the dark with an awful shriek, a sound like rusted metal screaming underwater. I slammed the door shut, threw the couch over it, and didn't sleep until sunrise. The next morning I drove into town, found a priest, paid him $200 in cash to bless the land. I don't even know if he believed me. I just needed to do something. When I came back, I found something hanging from the trees. 3 bundles of feathers and twine, arranged in a triangle. Beneath them, a ring of stones, and in the center, one of the jars from the cellar filled with black water. There were symbols drawn in the dirt all around it, the same ones I'd seen carved in the trees. But this time, they were wrong, twisted, inverted, like someone or something had mocked them. That night I boarded up the trapdoor, bolted it, nailed it. I even lit a fire inside the hearth and left the lanterns burning bright. But nothing came, not that night, not the next. On the 3rd night, just as I started to believe it was over, I heard the scratching, but not from below ... from the attic. I left the next morning. Haven't been back since. Sometimes when I'm driving late through the woods, I swear I see the symbols on tree trunks just off the shoulder. Sometimes I hear the dragging sounds in my dreams, and sometimes I wake up to find black feathers on my window ledge. The first time we heard the scratching, we thought it was the wind. That's the thing about the desert. Every sound out there feels like it means something, like it's whispering secrets through the cracks in the adobe walls. It was Lena who said it first. Her voice was coming in short, panicked gasps. "It's in the house," she whispered. "It's in here with us." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the base of the door, to the thin strip of light and the shadow that shifted beneath it, twisting like smoke, unnatural and wrong. Then came the growl. Deep, guttural, purposeful. It wasn't just a noise, it was a message. It knew where we were. And then the scratching started. Slow, deliberate. Long nails dragged across wood, pausing now and then, like it was listening for our fear. Lena screamed, "Stop it!" She covered her ears and collapsed against the wall. But the growl stopped, and that's when it got worse. A voice, soft at first, barely a whisper, but it was human, too human. Lena. It hissed her name like it was savoring every syllable. Lena froze. Her face went pale. How does it know my name? I didn't have an answer. We stayed in that room for what felt like hours. It paced, scratched, sometimes tapped on the windows with those same clawed fingers. Click, 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 like it was toying with us. I stood guard with a fireplace poker. Lena curled in the corner, clutching a blanket to her chest. I'd never felt so useless. Then came the sound of tires crunching gravel. Headlights washed through the window. Lena bolted upright. "It's the elder." I yanked the curtain aside. There he stood, tall and broad in the headlights, holding a bundle of smoking sage. Then it moved. The shadow peeled itself from the base of the fence, its shape low and hunched, all twisted limbs and wrong angles. It crawled toward him, slow but hungry. The elder didn't flinch. He raised Sage high and began chanting. The thing screeched, a high-pitched, inhuman shriek that made my bones rattle. "It doesn't like the sage," Lena said, her voice trembling. The creature lunged. The elder stood his ground and tossed a handful of something ash, maybe, into the air. It hit the thing like acid. It reeled back, screeching, body spasming, its form flickering like it couldn't decide what shape to take. For a moment it looked human, a woman, then a child, then a hollow-eyed thing with skin stretched too tight. "Stay here," the elder barked. He came into the house, moving like a force of nature. His eyes burned with fire. He set the sage on a dish, lit cedar, and let the smoke pour upward, filling the room with its thick, bitter scent. "It's a skinwalker," he said. "Someone sent it. It won't leave until we force it out." "Force it out how?" I asked. He didn't answer, just kept chanting and scattering ash and herbs in every corner. Finally, he looked at us. "You'll have to be strong," he said. "It feeds on fear. Don't give it what it wants." Right on cue, the door slammed. The house trembled. Shadows danced. The elder's chanting grew louder, more urgent. The air buzzed with energy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then everything went still. He lowered his arms. Sweat shimmered on his forehead. "It's gone," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. For now, the next morning we walked the property. That's when we found it, buried near the fence. A bundle wrapped in cloth, tied with human hair. Inside, bones, small ones, clean, arranged carefully, and a single piece of jewelry. "This is the curse," the elder said. "You were the target." He handed Leni a pouch of herbs. "Keep this with you, and stay away from whoever gave you that." Lena stared at the bundle. Her face went pale. "I think I know who it was," she whispered. "I didn't ask. I didn't want to know." We left later that day. I kept checking the mirror as we drove. The fence line was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't over. I was 3 weeks into my fire watch rotation when the cold started creeping in earlier than usual. They warned us about that when I took the station, how the winds in northern Idaho didn't always follow the seasons, how they could change overnight, and how sometimes that change carried more than just a chill. It was mid-September, but the forest below my tower looked like late November. The evergreens were coated in frost each morning, and the river that carved through the canyon had a glassy stillness, like it was waiting for something. Still, I liked the solitude. I wasn't running from anything dramatic. I just needed space. No phone, no traffic, no conversations that spiraled into obligation. Up there, it was just me, a battered logbook, the radio, and the rustle of pine needles that whispered with every shift in the wind. Then came the knock. It was just after 2:00 a.m., the wind howling like it had a purpose, and the windows of the tower fogging from the inside. I was scribbling an entry into the log, something about a lightning strike west of Tuttle Ridge when I heard it. A soft, singular knock, like someone had tapped once politely on the door of the watchtower 60 feet below. At first, I thought I imagined it. Nobody hikes up here. Not this late. Not without lights. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Measured, calm. I froze, pen still in hand. Who's there? I called, leaning toward the trapdoor that led to the stairwell. No answer. I grabbed the radio and keyed it up. Base, this is Tower 4. Got a possible trespasser at the base of my tower. Anyone report a missing hiker? Static. Then the voice of dispatch, sleepy and crackling. Negative, Tower 4. Nobody in your sector today. Weather's keeping most off the trails. You sure? I hesitated. Heard knocking, that's all. Could be a branch that wind's picking up. Log it and keep an eye out. I logged it. I watched for 2 hours, and I saw nothing until the next night. It started with the cold, bitter, penetrating, worse than before. I could see my breath inside the cabin, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. I stuffed a towel against the gap under the door, pulled on my extra thermal layers, and lit the small emergency heater we were allowed to use sparingly. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time it wasn't at the base of the tower. It was at the trapdoor, directly beneath my feet. I stood up so fast I knocked the radio off the desk. The trapdoor had a latch, a heavy one. I stared at it like I expected it to rattle loose. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. But then something began to climb. Slow, creaking footsteps on the metal stairs that spiraled around the tower, 1 foot at a time, like it didn't need to rush. I backed into the corner, flashlight raised, eyes locked on the hatch. The latch held. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard my voice coming from the other side of the door. "Let me in." Exactly my voice, my tone. But the rhythm was off, like someone trying to copy the cadence of a language they didn't speak. I didn't answer. I just sat there, frozen. Eventually it went quiet. After a while, I slept. I don't remember deciding to. I just woke up with the dawn. I should have left that morning. I didn't. By the third night, the cold wasn't just outside. It was in my chest, like breathing in ice. The forest was silent. Not even wind. I called base again. "You sure there's no one else out here?" "Tower 4, you're alone out there," dispatch said. "What's going on?" I don't think I'm alone." I stayed up again that night, this time with a thermos of coffee and the hatchet from the emergency locker next to me. It didn't knock. It climbed. I heard it scaling the beams of the tower like a spider. Metal creaked, but no footsteps. Just the sound of something moving too fast and too quietly. Then it was on the roof. I heard its weight shift directly above my head, and then scrape. It dragged something along the metal roof. Not claws' fingers. I could hear the bones clicking against the steel. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off the ceiling. It leaned over the edge of the tower and peered into the window. And it was me. My face, my eyes, but wrong, sunken, like it had been dug up and left to dry in the sun. Its mouth opened too wide, too slowly. "Let me in," it said again. Only this time the voice cracked. My voice broke. It couldn't hold the form anymore. Its mouth trembled and widened, and from it came a noise I will never forget, a layered, broken sound, like a woman sobbing, a dog whining, and metal scraping all at once. Then it disappeared over the side. I stayed locked inside the rest of the night. When daylight came, I climbed down. Not for long, just enough to check the perimeter. I needed to see if there were tracks, anything. And I found them. Not human, not animal. A set of prints, long and narrow, with too many toes, deep, frozen into the earth as if whatever made them was colder than the forest itself. I radioed base and told them I had symptoms of exposure, possibly hypothermia. That was enough to get a chopper out. I haven't gone back, but some nights, even here in the city, I'll hear a soft knock on the window. 3 times, and I won't look because I know what I'll see. And I know what it'll ask. Let me in. You ever feel like something followed you home from somewhere? Not a person, not an animal, something else. Something you couldn't explain if your life depended on it? That's how it started for me. It was supposed to be a 3-day camping trip. Just me and my brother, Liam. He'd found this place called Bitter Ridge, out near the base of the Uintas in Utah. He read about it in some hikers' forum. Said it had old mining trails, abandoned cabins, even a collapsed watchtower up on a bluff. Perfect kind of place if you wanted a quiet escape. And it was, at first, we set up camp not far from the base of the ridge. The pines were thick, the nights cool, and the only sounds were wind and distant bird calls. We spent the first 2 days exploring the ruins of a collapsed mine shaft and collecting firewood. It felt untouched, like the land had been waiting a long time for company. But then came the 3rd night. It started with a noise, small, almost delicate. We were sitting by the fire, Liam sipping from his dented flask, and I heard it from behind the tent. A twig snapping. I looked at him. Did you hear that? He paused, the flask halfway to his lips. Probably a deer, maybe elk, but it didn't sound like a deer. It was slower, like something testing its steps. We both went quiet, listening. Then came the breathing, shallow, raspy, almost wet. We stood up at the same time. I grabbed the flashlight, swung it toward the trees behind the tent. Nothing, just pines and shadow. Then Liam said, "There's someone out there." Not something. Someone. I turned to him, my skin crawling. "You sure?" He nodded, slow. I saw them, just for a second. Looked like a man, tall, just standing between the trees, watching. We decided not to sleep that night. The fire was kept alive. The guns were kept close. I must have dozed off around 4 a.m., because the next thing I remember is Liam shaking me hard, whispering, "Wake up. Look, look." I followed his gaze toward the tree line. There was something standing just beyond the reach of the firelight. It was shaped like a man, tall, lanky, but its limbs didn't hang right. One arm was too long. The other looked bent, like it had been broken at the elbow and never set right. Its skin, or what I could see of it, was grayish, stretched thin across bone. But the worst part, it was wearing Liam's face. Same sharp jaw, same hollow eyes, same sun-bleached hair. It was like staring into a twisted mirror. I turned to my brother, still sitting beside me, eyes wide, and then back at the thing, but it was gone. Vanished into the dark without a sound. "We're leaving," I said. We'd packed in silence. Neither of us spoke as we doused the fire and loaded the truck. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun was climbing over the mountains. It felt like safety, but we were wrong. That thing, it followed us back. We didn't notice right away. Days went by. We returned to our routines. I went back to work. Liam went back to welding. It was almost like nothing had happened, until one night I came home and found Liam sitting on my porch, pale, sweating. "It's here," he said. "What?" "I saw it last night. In the backyard. It had your face." I laughed. I shouldn't have, but it was instinct. Nervous laughter, but he didn't smile. "I'm serious. It was just standing by the shed, not doing anything, just looking at me." That night I didn't sleep. Neither did he. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. I peeked through the blinds, and there it was. Not me, not Liam, but something wearing our faces, switching between them. It would walk behind the trees, and when it came back out, it had changed. 1 second it looked like me, down to the coat I wore that morning, and the next it had Liam's hunched stance and cigarette behind the ear. It didn't try to come closer. It didn't need to. It just watched, and that was somehow worse. We tried to ignore it, boarded the windows, stopped going outside after dark. We even contacted a tribal elder a few towns over. Didn't give him details, just said we might have seen something up Bitter Ridge. He didn't ask questions, just told us it saw you. That's enough. He gave us cedar ash and black salt, told us to circle the house with it, keep the windows covered, don't answer if it calls our names. That was the last part. Don't speak to it, not even if it looks like someone you love, because it would, and it did. A week later, Liam went missing. He said he was going for cigarettes. Never came back. I checked the security cam footage and froze. At 3:14 a.m., Liam walked out the front door, but another Liam was already standing at the edge of the woods. It raised its hand, Liam raised his, and they walked off together. I've been alone since the thing still comes. Some nights it stands in the backyard. Sometimes it scratches the windows. Sometimes I hear it whispering from under the porch, asking to be let in. Sometimes it cries, sounds like Liam. I haven't answered. I won't. But the truth, I'm not sure how much longer I can hold out, because last night it didn't take Liam's face. It wore my mother's, and she's been dead for 6 years. The first thing I noticed was the smell, metallic, sharp, like rusted iron left out in the rain. I'd only just stepped out of the truck. The cabin was maybe 20 yards ahead, nestled beneath a canopy of twisted oaks. A gift, apparently, from my uncle, an old hunting spot he hadn't used in years. "Use it for the weekend," he told me. "No one will bother you out there." That smell, though, it hit me as soon as the wind changed. Subtle at first, like an old coin held too long in your hand, then stronger, mixed with something else, wet soil, and something rotten underneath it. I figured it was just the forest floor, all that damp and decay. Still, Baxter, my golden retriever, wouldn't get out of the truck. Just sat there, ears low, tail tucked, staring out the windshield like we weren't supposed to be here. "Come on," I said, patting the door. "You love the woods." He didn't move. Eventually, I left him, told myself it was just nerves from the drive. I grabbed my pack, locked the truck, and walked toward the cabin. It looked how you'd expect, rough, weathered, and about 2 seconds from collapsing. A single lantern hung above the door, swaying faintly despite the still air. The porch creaked beneath my boots. Inside was dust, cobwebs, and silence. I lit the stove, lit the lantern, lit a cigarette, sat in the one chair that didn't look like it had fallen apart under me, and I waited for the peace I usually felt in the woods. But the smell didn't go away. It lingered in the walls, in the floorboards, beneath my fingernails, it seemed, and the silence in the trees. It was too quiet, no wind, no birds, just listening. I went outside again. Baxter was still in the truck. When I opened the door, he didn't leap out like usual. He didn't whine. He just stared into the tree line behind me. Not at me, behind me. Seriously, I turned. Nothing. Just trees, dense, still. So I walked to the edge of the clearing, squinting through the branches. And that's when I saw it, just a flash, a pale face in the trees, barely visible between the trunks, staring, then gone. I laughed it off. Nerves, I told myself. Exhaustion, that's all it was. Hell, I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Back in the cabin, I heated a can of chili and turned on the radio. Static. Then a country station out of Knoxville. The signal cut in and out, but it was enough to distract me while I ate. By nightfall, I was thinking about driving back. I hated how the place felt, like it was watching me. Not haunted, no. I don't believe in that. But haunted? Yeah. Something was wrong. I called for Baxter again. He finally jumped down and padded up the porch steps, but he wouldn't come inside. Just curled up in front of the door like a sentry. Around 11 p.m., I heard something behind the cabin. A crunch, dry leaves. Slow, purposeful. I killed the radio. Another step, closer. I grabbed my flashlight and the old rifle my uncle left behind. Swung the door open, nothing. The beam swept over the clearing, the grass, the trees, empty. But the smell was back, stronger now, like copper and meat. Baxter growled, his ears pinned, his hackles raised. I whispered his name. He didn't even blink. And then came the voice, from the trees. Not loud, not a shout, just a voice, soft and familiar. "Hey, buddy." It was my voice, exactly, down to the tired rasp, like someone had recorded me and played it back with all the life drained out. I froze. Baxter barked once, sharp and panicked, and bolted back into the truck. I didn't stop him. "Hey, buddy," it said again. Closer now, too close. I pointed the flashlight at the tree line. A figure stepped out from the dark. It was me, or something wearing me, same flannel shirt, same boots, same patchy beard, but the skin was wrong. The smile was stretched too wide, and the eyes empty. Not blind, just empty, like it had never needed eyes in the first place. I slammed the door and locked it, barricaded it with the table. It kept calling. Same voice, same tone, over and over. "Hey, buddy, come on out, it's safe." Then the scratching started, slow, deliberate, under the windows, on the back wall, on the roof, everywhere. The lantern flickered. The smell got worse. The air grew thick. I sat in the corner, rifle pointed at the door, listening. Eventually it stopped, or maybe I passed out. I don't remember. It was morning when I woke. Sunlight cut through the slats in the boards. Baxter was still in the truck, pacing inside, barking at the cabin like I was a threat now. When I opened the door, the smell hit me like a wall. Not copper, not meat, just rot. I stepped outside. Every inch of the cabin was marked, scratched with long gouges, like claws dragged through the wood. All the windows were smeared with something dark, like blood, but too thick, tar-like. And in the dirt, footprints, hundreds of them, all mine, every one of them. I never found out what it was, never told anyone either. I boarded up the cabin, sold the truck, and haven't been back since. But every now and then I hear a knock on my apartment door. 3 quick taps. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear my own voice on the other side. Hey, buddy. I hadn't seen another person in 4 days. That was the whole point. No emails, no traffic, no neighbors asking how I was holding up. Just me, the cabin, and the forest. I'd rented it off some backwater website, the kind with no reviews and outdated photos that looked scanned in from the 90s. But it was cheap, and it promised seclusion. A rustic stay deep in the Pennsylvania woods. And I needed seclusion. After what happened in Idaho last fall, I couldn't sleep right, couldn't think straight. People kept telling me, I'd imagined it, that my stress and isolation had gotten to me. I almost believed them. But that feeling never left, that watched feeling. Like the woods weren't just full, they were aware. The cabin here was nicer than expected. Small, but well kept. Generator powered. A fireplace. A stocked woodpile. Even a little radio. I set up on the first night, lit a fire, and sat on the front porch while the sun dipped behind the trees. The forest here was thicker than out west, denser. Shadows came earlier. I told myself I was safe. Day 1 passed quietly. I hiked the trails behind the cabin, filled the journal with scattered thoughts, drank bad coffee, and fell asleep to the sound of the wind rushing the leaves. Nothing unusual. Day 2, the wind changed, and so did the silence. You ever notice how forests breathe? There's a rhythm wind, insects, birds. Even the trees groan like lungs expanding. But on the second day, I realized the forest had gone still. No bird song, no rustle, just an oppressive hush. The kind that makes you feel like you're trespassing. That night I heard the knock. 3 slow taps on the back wall. I froze. You know that kind of quiet where your breath sounds loud? That's where I was. I turned off the radio, picked up the axe I'd been using for firewood, waited. Nothing. The next morning I walked around the cabin. No footprints, no claw marks, no broken branches. But the smell was off, faint, like wet fur and copper. Day 3 was worse. The woods never came back to life. That silence just deepened. Every now and then I'd hear something out there, twigs snapping in quick bursts, like someone trying not to be heard. But nothing ever showed itself. And that night, I heard my voice outside the cabin, calling from the woods, "Hey, it's just me. Open the door." I didn't move. It kept going, same exact tone, same inflections. Word for word, the voicemail I'd left my sister last week. "I'm okay. I just need time. I'll be back soon. Don't worry." A perfect mimic, played back in the wrong mouth. Then silence. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the corner with the axe across my knees, watching the door. Day 4. Today, the sky was wrong when I woke up. Not cloudy, gray. The kind of gray that soaks everything in dull light, flattens the world. I tried the radio. Static. The generator wouldn't kick on either. I was alone, truly. I packed my bag before noon. Decided to hike out early, get back to my car, forget this whole place ever existed. But when I reached the path, it was gone. Just gone. I walked for hours. No trail markers, no signs, just trees. All of them wrong. The same warped knot in the bark. The same low branch shaped like a crooked finger. Again and again. Like the forest was looping. When I finally made it back to the cabin, I didn't even feel surprised. It was waiting for me, and the front door was open. Not broken, not forced, just swinging slowly on its hinges. Inside it smelled like blood, but there wasn't any. Everything was in place, firewood, empty mug, notebook. The only thing that had changed was the mirror above the fireplace. It wasn't mine, it wasn't even a mirror. It looked like one from across the room, but when I got close, it didn't reflect me. It showed the forest, that same clearing out back, and standing in the center of it, me, but not me. He was taller, his limbs too long, his head tilted at an impossible angle, like it was hanging by a thread. And his face, no expression, just skin, smooth, like a mask before it's carved. Then he moved, and I moved with him. Every motion he made, I mirrored. Or he mirrored me. I couldn't tell. When I stepped back, he stepped forward. When I raised my hand, he did too. But then he kept going. I stopped moving. He didn't. He pressed his hand to the inside of the glass. I didn't. He smiled. I didn't. And his face, his skin, began to split. Right down the center, I ran out the front door. Into the trees. Didn't care about the trail. Didn't care about the truck. I just ran until the smell hit me again, wet fur and blood. And I stopped because the trees had gone still. And the voice returned from right behind me. "You can't leave this time." I'm in a ranger's station now. Found it by dumb luck. Empty, dusty, still running on backup power. I've locked every window, every door. There's a flare gun in the drawer and a half-used radio, crackling with static. And out there just past the tree line, I see myself, still smiling, still watching. I don't know what it is, but I know what it wants. It didn't follow me. It found me again. I grew up around the timberlands near high water, Oregon dense pine forests, fog-thick valleys, old logging roads that went nowhere, and stories that traveled further than any map ever dared. When I moved back to take care of my dad's property after his stroke, I thought I was ready for the quiet again. I wasn't. Dad had always been a superstitious man. Chalk circles in the corners of rooms, salt lines across the thresholds, wind chimes made of bones, not animal, not human, just strange. He never explained them, and I never asked. I got the call that he'd been found wandering Route 7 in nothing but boots and a hospital gown. He kept muttering the same thing over and over. Don't follow the whistle. Don't you dare follow the damn whistle. We thought it was the stroke talking, just scrambled nerves. But I'm not so sure anymore. The first few nights at the house were fine. Isolated, sure, but that was the draw. No cell service, no neighbors, just the hum of trees and the whisper of wind. But then I started hearing it, the whistle. It didn't come from the woods, not at first. It came from inside the house. I'd wake up at 3:13 a.m. on the dot, every night, to that same slow, descending whistle. The kind kids do when they're trying to annoy you. 4 notes, slow, playful, cruel. At first I thought it was the pipes, or a bird, but birds don't know how to mimic melody with perfect pitch, and pipes don't move. The first time I heard it under my bed, I thought I was dreaming. The second time I knew I wasn't. I started keeping a bat next to my bed. Then I upgraded to my dad's old .45. The whistle always came at the same time. 3:13 a.m., always 4 notes. Always close. Never outside. Not yet. One night, I decided to wait up. I sat on the couch with the pistol across my lap, coffee in one hand, flashlight in the other. The house creaked and moaned like any good haunted place should, but there was nothing out of the ordinary until 3:13 a.m. Then came the whistle, clear as a bell. This time it was in the attic. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The whistle came again, a little louder, a little closer. Then the trap door creaked open. I should have run. Any sane person would have, but I did what my dad told me never to do. I followed the whistle. The attic was pitch black, dusty, stinking of mildew and mothballs and something older. I raised the flashlight slowly. Saw nothing but boxes and beams and cobwebs. Then I heard it again, from behind me. 4 notes. I turned so fast I nearly dropped the flashlight, but there was nothing there. Just the open hatch behind me and the thin beam of moonlight from the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light on, the pistol in my hand. The whistle never came again, at least not inside the house. It moved to the woods. There's a logging trail behind the house that hasn't been used in decades. It winds up toward Black Hollow Ridge, a place locals don't like to talk about. When I was a kid, we used to dare each other to walk there at night. Nobody ever made it past the deadfall. Nobody wanted to. That's where the whistle led me next. I was out feeding the generator around dusk when I heard it, clear as day, drifting through the trees. 4 notes, same melody, same timing. Roscoe, the dog I adopted from my dad's neighbor, bolted toward the trees before I could grab him. He didn't bark, didn't hesitate, just ran. I followed. Like a fool, I followed. The trail was different at night. The trees leaned closer. The shadows twisted, every sound felt aimed directly at me. Roscoe was ahead, but I could hear him, whimpering, then growling, then silence. I kept calling him, but the only thing that answered was the whistle. Louder now, closer, all around me, 4 notes. It sounded like it was circling. Then I saw him. At least I thought I did. Standing on the trail just ahead, Roscoe, tail still, ears alert, staring at me. But something was wrong. His mouth was hanging open, not panting, not growling, just open. And his eyes weren't right. Too wide, too still, reflecting light that didn't exist. I took a step forward, and that's when I heard it, behind me this time. Whimpering, the real Roscoe. I turned around, and there he was, muddy and shaking, ears pinned flat. I looked back toward the figure on the trail, and it was gone. Just gone, no sound, no movement. Just empty trail and the sound of my own breath catching in my throat. I picked up Roscoe and we ran. I didn't look back, not even once. The next day, I found footprints near the edge of the woods. They weren't mine. They weren't Roscoe's. They were barefoot, human, but long, too long, and there were only 3 toes. I called the sheriff. He gave me the usual. Could be a drifter, a prank, maybe teens messing around. But I could see it in his eyes. He'd heard it, too. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud. He left me with 2 words. Don't follow. I spent the next night with earplugs in, TV blasting, every light on. Still woke up at 3:13 a.m. Still heard the whistle. Roscoe stood at the door, growling low, tail between his legs. That was the last straw. I packed my bags that morning, called my brother, told him I was done, that the property wasn't worth keeping. He didn't argue. Said he'd heard the whistle, too. Said it had followed him into his dreams. I left that night. Didn't wait for morning. Didn't even say goodbye. Just like before, but this time it smiled. Epilogue, written in police report form. Recovered journal entry, found in cabin at Highwater Ridge. If you're reading this, don't follow the sound. Don't follow the whistle. No matter what it looks like, no matter what name it says, it's not your friend. It's not your dog. It's not your family. Once you look it in the eyes, it never stops. My name is Daniel Smoke. I'm a forest surveyor, part of a small team contracted by the state to inspect and document areas in Nicollet National Forest, northern Wisconsin. If you're unfamiliar, it's one of those places that feels older than time itself. Miles upon miles of pine, birch, and spruce stitched together with muddy logging trails and moss-covered rock outcroppings. Beautiful, sure, but silent in a way that makes you feel like you're trespassing. This happened to me in the fall of 2002, and I've never been able to shake it, not just the memory, but the feeling. The raw, instinctive knowledge that something was watching me and wanted me gone. It started when my partner, Jesse, called out sick. We'd been working a grid about 5 miles off County Road F, charting beetle infestations. With Jesse down, I volunteered to wrap up the last 3 plots solo. I'd done it before. Hell, half the time I preferred the solitude. Gave me a break from the noise of life. Just me, the woods, and the sound of my boots in the underbrush. I signed out the ATV and gear from the ranger station and headed out at sunrise. It was a chilly morning, that kind of damp cold that sits in your joints and tells you winter's coming. The sky was steel gray, the wind cutting low through the trees. I reached the drop point by 7:30, parked the ATV off trail, and hiked in about 1.5 miles with my pack, clipboard, and GPS. At first, everything was normal, silent, still, just the usual rustle of squirrels and the occasional far-off bird call. But about an hour in, I noticed it. The forest got quiet, not in a peaceful way, in a wrong way, like something was waiting. The air went still, no wind, no birds. Even the squirrels were gone. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, just the creeping stillness of early autumn. But the further I hiked into Plot 27, the heavier it felt. Then I started seeing the trees. They were marked, claw marks. At first I thought maybe a bear, but these weren't right. The spacing was too wide, the gouges too deep. 5 slashes, clean, angled in a way that suggested intent. Not random swipes like whatever made them had hands, not paws. I took photos, logged it, and moved on. I'd seen strange stuff before. This was Wisconsin. It's wild land, but my skin was crawling. Around noon, I stopped for lunch at a rocky outcrop near the southern edge of the grid. I remember biting into my sandwich and catching a scent, wet fur and copper, like blood. It hit hard, sudden, and I stood up fast, looking around. That's when I saw it. About 40 yards down the slope, half concealed in shadow, something was standing between the trees. I thought it was a bear at first, tall, hulking, but then it shifted, stepped forward, and I saw the legs. It was walking upright, massive, at least 8 feet tall, with a long torso, bent legs like a dog's, and arms, actual arms, long and corded with muscle, hanging almost to its knees. The fur was dark gray, thick, and matted. Its head looked wrong, like a German shepherd's, but stretched, exaggerated. And the eyes, God, the eyes, they glowed amber, even in daylight, locked straight on me, like it had known I'd be here all along. I didn't move. I couldn't. The thing didn't growl, didn't charge, it just tilted its head slow, curious, like it was studying me. Then it stepped behind the trees and vanished. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally moved. I packed everything in seconds, my hands shaking so bad I dropped my compass twice. I left markers to find my way back and booked it toward the ATV. It followed me. I didn't see it again, but I heard it, branches cracking, that low, guttural breathing just out of sight. Every time I stopped, it stopped. Every time I turned, the woods behind me were empty. By the time I reached the ATV, my legs were cramping from the tension. I gunned it without even putting my helmet back on. I didn't stop until I hit the station. I didn't report it. What could I say? That I saw a walking wolf in the woods? They'd laugh, blame stress, say I was sleep-deprived. I told them I'd seen signs of an aggressive bear and requested a different grid for the next few weeks. But I couldn't stay away from the thought of it. I started digging. Forums, old newspaper clippings. That's when I found the term, Dogman. It picked people. I started dreaming about it, waking up with the scent of wet fur in my nose, swearing I heard that low panting outside my bedroom window. I moved 3 months later, took a job in Duluth. Different trees, different land, but even now I won't go into the woods alone. I won't hike unarmed. And I haven't been back to Nicolette since. Because something's in those trees, something that isn't supposed to exist, and I think it remembers me. My name's Caleb Strong, and I worked for 15 years as a wildlife biologist for the state of West Virginia. Most of that time was spent in the Monongahela National Forest, thousands of acres of dense forest, jagged ridgelines, and old coal roads winding through the mountains like forgotten veins. I've cataloged bobcats, tracked black bears, even stared down a pack of coyotes. I don't scare easy, but what happened to me on Coal Ridge Trail in 2010, it broke something inside me. I'm not telling this for attention. I don't care if anyone believes me. I just need to say it out loud because I still wake up some nights gasping for air, the smell of wet pine and rot stuck in my nose. It was early October, right as the leaves started turning. I'd been sent out to investigate a string of livestock disappearances near a rural hollow just outside Greenbrier County. Locals blamed coyotes, but the kills were too clean. No drag marks, no mess, just gone. I'd heard of Coal Ridge before. Old-timers told stories about strange sightings, shadows in the trees, howling that sounded too human. One even claims something chased his mule team off a cliff in the 60s. Folklore, I thought. Backwoods ghost stories. Still, I brought my .45. I parked my truck at the trailhead just after sunrise. It was colder than usual, crisp and still, the kind of air that makes sound travel. I hiked 3 miles up an old mining trail. Overgrown but still walkable. Trees lined the path, so thick the sky barely peeked through. Around mid-morning, I found a carcass. A deer, maybe 2 days dead, but something was off. Its chest was torn open, but there were no teeth marks, no sign of struggle. The eyes had been gouged clean out. I crouched beside it, snapping photos and jotting notes, when I heard it, a sound I've never forgotten. Not a growl, not a howl. Something in between. Low, rumbling, and wrong. It echoed from deeper in the woods, maybe 100 yards off trail. I stood up fast, heart pounding. I should have left. Every instinct told me to backtrack and radio it in. But I was trained to investigate. So like an idiot, I followed the sound. The forest got darker the deeper I went. Pines thickened, blotting out the sun. Birds stopped singing. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps after a while, just the faint creak of branches high above. Then I found the clearing. It was a small hollow, maybe 20 feet wide. In the center, a ring of rocks surrounded a pile of bones, animal bones, mostly, but there were clothes mixed in. A torn flannel, a child's sneaker. I didn't breathe, I didn't move. Then I saw it, standing just beyond the ring of trees. It looked like a massive dog at first, long limbs covered in dark, matted fur. But it stood upright. Its legs were bent backward like a deer's, and its arms hung low, almost to its knees, ending in clawed fingers, not paws. Its head was all wrong. A long snout, pointed ears, eyes that glowed gold in the gloom. But it wasn't just the shape, it was the way it looked at me. Not like prey, not like a threat. It studied me, curious, intelligent. Then it took a step forward. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I turned and ran, stumbling through the brush, crashing through branches like a madman. I didn't care about the trail. I didn't care about the gear I dropped. I just ran. It followed. I didn't hear footsteps, just movement. Fast, deliberate, weaving through the trees like it had lived there 1,000 years. When I burst out onto the trail again, I didn't stop. My lungs burned. My heart was a war drum. But I didn't stop until I saw my truck. I peeled out, gravel flying, and didn't look in the rear view until I hit the county road. Nothing. I radioed it in as a possible bear encounter. Said I was spooked, maybe hallucinated the rest. I don't know if the station ever believed me. They didn't press it. But a week later, a family disappeared camping near the same area. Tents shredded, blood on the leaves, no bodies. Search dogs refused to enter the woods past a certain point. They just howled. One even ran back to the trucks and wouldn't come out for 2 days. After that, I refused to work in the Coal Ridge sector. Told them I had vertigo issues. They transferred me to river ecosystems. But I still think about it, especially on cold, still nights when the wind's just right. Sometimes I hear that sound again, that low, vibrating, not quite howl. My wife says it's just coyotes. I know better. I don't go into the woods alone anymore, not even to fish, because there's something out there, and it's not a bear, it's not a coyote, it's not a man in a costume. It's something old, something that's been watching for a long time, and I think sometimes it remembers me. My name's Evan Knox, and I've been a wildlife photographer for over 14 years. I've crawled through African brush to shoot lions, hung from ice-covered ledges for snow leopards, even spent 3 nights on a raft to get a single photo of a jaguar swimming across a South American river. But nothing has ever come close to what I saw last October in northern Michigan. I was freelancing for a nature publication, doing a story on disappearing wolf packs in the Upper Peninsula. They wanted intimate shots, den sites, paw prints, even a mother with her cubs if I was lucky. I'd worked with apex predators before, so I wasn't nervous, just focused. The plan was simple. 2 weeks in a remote research cabin, the DNR, used for seasonal surveys. They dropped me off by a TV and wouldn't be back until the end of the assignment. No roads, no trails, just forest. At first, it was everything I'd hoped for. The trees were painted in autumn fire, a mosaic of orange and red stretching endlessly. I'd tracked some wolf prints by the first creek bed. Even got some decent night shots with the motion triggers I set up. My second night was uneventful until I checked one of my trail cams the following morning. The still frame caught something I couldn't make sense of. It was mid-frame, partially in shadow, but clearly not a deer or bear. It stood upright, shoulders too broad, arms too long. The eyes, those goddamn eyes, were glowing white in the IR flash. I stared at the grainy image, thinking maybe it was a poacher in ghillie gear, but the shape was all wrong. The knees were bent backward. I told myself it was a trick of the light. A misfire. I deleted the file, which I regret now, but I didn't want to obsess over nothing. The third night, everything changed. Around 2:30 a.m., I was reviewing long exposures on my laptop when I heard it. A low, rhythmic thudding, like something heavy walking across the forest floor. I killed the lights, listened. The sound was deliberate. Step, step, pause, step. I grabbed my camera, heart pounding, and moved toward the window, which overlooked the north clearing. I saw movement at the edge of the tree line. I raised the viewfinder, adjusted for the moonlight, and took a shot. The camera's click sounded too loud, echoing through the stillness. The figure stopped. Then it turned slowly and looked directly at the cabin. My breath caught. Through the lens, I could see it clearly now. It stood upright, easily over 8 feet. Its body was covered in thick, coarse fur, black, but patchy in spots like it had been burned. The limbs were wrong, arms hung low, ending in clawed hands that almost dragged along the ground. The face, Jesus. The snout was elongated like a wolf, but there was something horribly human in its posture. Its eyes didn't reflect, they glowed. That wasn't camera flare. It saw me, and then it smiled. Not like a dog showing teeth. This was deliberate, slow, malicious. I dropped the camera and backed away from the window. That smile, it wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. I locked the cabin door and sat with my back against it, shotgun across my lap. I hadn't brought it for wolvesome. I'd brought it for bears. Now I wasn't sure it would do anything. For hours I listened. It circled the cabin at least twice. Once, I swear, I heard it sniffing the logs near the base. Another time, there was a light tap against the glass, almost polite, like it was testing the thickness. At sunrise, it was gone. I should have called for pickup. I knew I should have, but I was proud, stupidly proud. This was my assignment. I was going to see it through. The 6th night, I made the mistake of staying out late. I'd followed fresh tracks past the creek. Big tracks, bipedal. They led deeper into the woods where the trees grew tighter and older, the kind of forest that feels like it's holding its breath. Just as I was setting up a long exposure by a game trail, I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned. There was nothing, but the air shifted. You know that awful moment right before lightning strikes? That's what it felt like. The silence was pressing, unnatural. I looked through the viewfinder, scanning. That's when I saw it again. Not 20 feet away, crouched beside a tree like it had been there all along. It didn't charge. It didn't growl. It just stood slowly, like it wanted me to watch the whole thing. This time I saw more. The way its shoulder blades shifted beneath the skin. The way its chest rose and fell with calm, controlled breaths. Its claws were longer than my fingers, its teeth yellow and thick like they hadn't evolved for chewing, only tearing. I raised my camera. Reflex. It moved, not ran, moved. In an instant it was inches from me. I screamed, stumbling backward into the mud, dropping everything. It crouched again, tilting its head, that god-awful grin returning like it was enjoying this. Then, just like before, it turned and disappeared into the trees. I don't remember the hike back to the cabin. I just remember locking the door and not sleeping. I was extracted the next morning. I told them the batteries on my set phone died early, that I was done with the assignment. They didn't ask many questions. I've since reviewed the images. The one I snapped just before it moved, blurry, underexposed, but it's there. You can see the silhouette, the claws, the grin. Most people who look at it say it's a bear, but they're wrong. It knew I was there. It let me live. It wanted me to remember it. I haven't gone back to the woods since. But some nights when the wind howls outside my apartment and the shadows seem just a little too still, I think about that grin, that thing, and I wonder how many others it's shown itself to, and why it chose me. People think being a sheriff's deputy in rural Texas is just handing out speeding tickets and checking up on rowdy teens drinking behind barns. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's worse. Way worse. My name's Deputy Charles Mercer. I've worked for the West Homo County Sheriff's Office for 17 years. I've seen drunks, meth heads, even the occasional fugitive. But I'd trade all of them in a heartbeat for what I saw that night on the Jenkins Ranch. It started with a call about dead cattle, 3 heifers, found just before sunrise by old Hank Jenkins, a rancher whose family's owned that patch of scrubland since before the Dust Bowl. Hank wasn't the type to panic. Hard as boot leather and twice as stubborn. So when he called dispatch sounding shaken, I paid attention. I arrived around 6:45 a.m. The sun hadn't fully broken the horizon yet, just painting the fields in that dusty amber haze. Hank was waiting by the gate, pale under his straw hat, one hand holding a thermos that was shaking a little too much for a man like him. "They ain't right," he muttered as I stepped out of my cruiser. "Ain't no coyotes did this." He led me out to the pasture. What I saw made my stomach drop. 3 cows sprawled in the dirt, their bodies torn open. Not eaten, opened, like something had been studying them. There wasn't a drop of blood on the ground. Their eyes were gone, their jaws dislocated, tongues missing. The incisions looked surgical, like someone or something had known exactly where to cut. I crouched down, snapped a few pictures with my phone. "You move anything?" Hank shook his head. "Not a damn thing. Just stood here waiting. But I did hear something last night, big, heavy, walking near the shed after midnight. Figured it was just deer till the dog started acting up. Then I heard it growl." I frowned. "You sure it was a growl? Could have been a feral hog." He met my eyes. "I know what pigs sound like, Deputy. This was deeper, like it came from a well." I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wanted to write it off. Coyotes can get creative and ranchers love a good, spooky story. But the unease in Hank's voice was real. I filed a report, promised to send a wildlife officer to follow up, and headed back to the station. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. 2 nights later, we got another call from the Riggs farm, 15 miles down the highway. Same story. Dead livestock. No blood, clean cuts. No tracks, and the same thing kept coming up. Something in the dark, watching, walking. By the 4th call, I was losing sleep. These weren't just predators. Something was toying with these people, hunting without feeding, marking territory. And then it got worse. It started watching the homes. Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly widow out near County Road 12, reported seeing something tall standing at the tree line behind her house. Said it stared for 15 minutes, never moved, never blinked. Then it was gone. And on the 8th night, it came for me. It was 1:22 a.m. I'd just finished a welfare check and was on my way back home when I passed the old wind farm out past Harlan Mesa. My cruiser's headlights flickered for a second. Thought it was the battery. Then the engine sputtered and died. I coasted to the shoulder, cursed under my breath, grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I'm out by Harlan Mesa. Cruiser just died on me. Can you send?" Then I heard it breathing from the tree line on the passenger side. Slow, deep, rhythmic, like something enormous was crouched just beyond the reach of the headlights. I froze. It moved. First just a shape, black against black. But as it stepped forward, the light caught its outline. I'll never forget it. Tall, maybe 9 feet, upright, shoulders like fence posts, arms too long, hanging low with claws that curled like knives. The head was like a wolf's but broader, the eyes glowing, not reflective, glowing, amber, intelligent, predatory. We stared at each other. I couldn't breathe, couldn't blink. Then it smiled. Not with its mouth, with its eyes. It stepped closer, and I swear to God it raised one hand like it was going to tap on the window. I fumbled for my pistol. The lights flickered. It vanished. Not ran, vanished, like smoke. The engine roared back to life. I floored it. Didn't stop until I hit the sheriff's office, tires squealing into the lot. I must have looked like hell, pale, sweating, gun still clutched in one hand. The chief thought I'd had a breakdown. I didn't argue. The next day, I tendered my resignation. People still call me about strange howls, about livestock found gutted, about shadows at their windows. I don't go out there anymore. That thing isn't just hunting animals. It's studying us, learning, waiting, and somewhere out in those empty fields and mesquite groves of West Hollow County, it still watches, still walks, still smiles that silent, knowing grin. If you ever find yourself driving the back roads of Texas late at night, and your headlights flicker near a stand of trees, don't stop. Don't look. And if something steps out of the shadows to watch you drive by, keep driving, because if you look too long, it might follow. My name's Trevor Miles. I'm 42 now, but back when this happened, I had just turned 30. I'd taken a temporary job as a maintenance contractor for a grain elevator company that serviced rural sites across the Dakotas. These were old silos, most built in the 50s and 60s, and every year they sent crews to inspect, repair, or dismantle the ones too far gone. This particular site was in Harding County, South Dakota. Closest town was a little spot called Buffalo, less than 400 people. The grain elevator itself stood about 6 miles out, surrounded by nothing but wind-stripped fields and a dense tree line that cut in tight from the northwest. 4 silos, 1 grain leg tower, and a control shack that hadn't seen proper use in over a decade. They sent me out alone. which wasn't supposed to happen, usually a two-man job at minimum. But a snowstorm had grounded most of the other techs, and I'd already made the drive. The job was simple. Climb the leg tower, photograph the corrosion, and log any safety hazards for demolition approval. It started strange. There was a dog, just standing at the edge of the tree line when I pulled in. Big thing, German Shepherd or maybe a Malamute, I thought, but it didn't move, just stared. Its silhouette caught in the rear view like a glitch in the frame. I went about my business, unlocked the control shack, powered up my equipment, ran diagnostics on the grain leg. It wasn't until I stepped outside again to do a perimeter check that I realized something was off. The wind had stopped, dead still. That flat prairie silence you only get before a blizzard or something worse. That's when I noticed the prints. Massive clawed tracks in the snow, bipedal. The stride was long, maybe 5 feet between impressions, and they circled the silo complex in a wide arc. Not a single set, multiple, 3 or 4, maybe more. My first thought was some kids playing a prank with snowshoes or fabricated tracks, but these weren't stamped. They were sunk deep, weighted. I took photos because it felt like one of those moments where proof might be important later. When I climbed the legged tower, it was with that familiar chill on the back of the neck, the kind you can't shake, the kind that says something is watching. From 120 feet up, I could see across the plains for miles, except for the woods. The trees looked darker than they should have, even with the midday sun cutting through the clouds. That's when I saw it. A figure moved along the edge of the tree line, on all fours at first, black, almost fluid in motion. Then it rose, slowly, upright. It was tall, 8 feet at least, but lean. Too lean. The limbs were long. The arms reached below the waist and ended in hands, not paws. It turned slightly, just enough for me to see the eyes. Amber, reflective even in the light, like they generated their own glow. I backed down the ladder, hands shaking. At the bottom, I called it in to my supervisor. "There's something out here," I said. He laughed it off. "Cougar? Bear?" "No," I said, quieter now. "No, this isn't. It's not an animal." It stood up. The call dropped. I wasn't alone anymore. From the base of the grain leg, I could hear breathing. Long exhales, wet, guttural. It was coming from inside the nearest silo. One of the old ones, its hatch warped from years of rust and sun damage. I approached carefully, flashlight drawn. My boots crunched the gravel, but otherwise the world had gone completely silent again. Then the hatch moved, not swung open, just flexed. Something pushed against it from inside, slow, controlled, testing. I took one step back, then another. The hatch suddenly blew open. Something came out low and fast, blurring across the gravel, scraping claws echoing like knives on pavement. I dropped my flashlight and ran. I didn't think. I just sprinted toward the shack, heart hammering, lungs burning. I slammed the door behind me, locked it, backed into the far wall. The creature didn't follow me in. It didn't need to. It began circling the shack. I heard the claws tapping on the outer walls. Once, twice. Then silence. Then a slow, dragging scrape, like fingernails on a chalkboard. It paused at the window, and though I couldn't see it fully through the grime, I saw the shape, the height, The eyes. Those goddamn glowing eyes. It stood there, watching. Then it crouched, head ducking just low enough to vanish from view. I waited. 30 minutes, an hour, maybe more. When I finally cracked the door open again, the tracks were gone. The prints in the snow? Erased. The only sign anything had been there was my fallen flashlight, half crushed and coated in drool. I left everything behind. Gear, tools, reports. I drove through a blizzard to get back to civilization. The company thought I had a breakdown. I didn't argue. I didn't go back. But I started watching the news. And over the next 2 years, I found 7 reports of similar sightings, each one near grain silos or remote industrial sites, always at the edge of old forest lines. Most were dismissed as misidentifications or tall tales from drunk locals. But I know better. I've seen them. And sometimes in the dead of winter, when the wind dies and the silence presses in, I hear them breathing again, long, slow, just outside the walls of wherever I am, waiting. My name is Ben Colton. I'm 39 now, but the events I'm about to tell you happened back in 2016. The summer I finally agreed to house sit my uncle's cabin in northern Georgia. It was tucked back in the woods outside a little ghost town called Larkspur Hollow, maybe 15 miles off the nearest paved road, surrounded by national forest, forgotten hunting trails, and not much else. I should have said no, but my Uncle Tom was the only family I had left, and when he asked me to look after the property while he underwent surgery in Atlanta, I didn't hesitate. Just feed the dog, walk the perimeter once a day, and don't worry about the woods. If something's out there, it usually keeps to itself. Usually. The cabin was beautiful in that warm southern way, rustic with a long front porch and a fire pit circled by mismatched chairs. There were sheds, a chicken coop, an old well he'd sealed up decades ago. Beyond the back fence was nothing but miles of dense pine and oak. A few game trails threaded through the brush, but Tom warned me not to follow any of them too far. "You'll get turned around real easy," he said. "These woods bend." I didn't know what he meant until later. At first, things were fine, peaceful even. His dog, Jasper, a mutt built like a wolfhound and lab mix, took to me immediately. Each night we'd sit on the porch, sipping beers. Well, I did, and listen to the frogs in the creek bed below the ridge. But around the 4th night, things began to shift. Jasper started growling at the trees. Not the casual, alert kind of growl either. This was deep, guttural, fur-raised, lip-curled kind of growling. The first time it happened, I assumed he'd caught scent of a bear or a coyote. But when I went for the spotlight to check, Jasper whined and backed into the house. I stood on the porch, sweeping the light over the tree line, and saw nothing. But I felt it, that pressure, like standing in a room where someone's just gone silent behind you. The woods, which had been full of nighttime sounds, crickets, frogs, wind in the branches, were suddenly dead. I don't mean quiet, I mean lifeless. No wind, no sound, just an oppressive, suffocating stillness that made my skin crawl. Then I heard it. A clicking, like claws tapping against wood, slow, methodical. It was coming from the back of the house, near the shed. I spun the spotlight and took a step off the porch, but Jasper barked, loud, sharp, urgent, and bolted in front of me, hackles raised like a ridge of steel wire. I didn't see what he saw, but the light caught something. Eyes, amber, high off the ground, maybe 7 or 8 feet up, watching me through the trees. The moment I locked on them, they vanished. Like something ducked, I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I found scratches on the shed. 3 deep gouges, waist high, not bare marks, too straight, too clean, like someone had dragged a hunting knife through the wood. I told myself it was nothing. Tree branches in the wind, wood rot splitting. I didn't believe it, but I needed to pretend. 2 nights later, it came closer. I woke up around 3 a.m. to Jasper growling again, but this time it wasn't coming from the living room. He was in my bedroom, teeth bared, staring at the window. And the window was open. I know I'd locked it. The screen had been cut. I grabbed my uncle's shotgun from the closet, ran out to the porch, and scanned the tree line. Nothing, but that silence was back, heavy, pushing on my chest, and the feeling of being watched, of something leaning just beyond the reach of the porch light, was overwhelming. I didn't go back to bed. I sat in the kitchen with Jasper at my feet, the gun across my lap, eyes locked on the front door. Right before dawn, something tapped on the window behind me. Not a knock, a tap, light, deliberate, like it wanted me to know it was still there. That day I hiked the perimeter like Tom had asked me to do, but this time I brought the shotgun and Jasper, who wouldn't leave my side. We reached the back ridge where the creek cut through the woods, and that's when I found the footprints. Huge, longer than mine by half, with claw marks at the tips, bipedal. Whatever had walked through there had done so upright. The impressions were deep, spaced far apart like a runner's stride, but the weight distribution was wrong. The heels didn't sink. It was all toes and claws. We followed the trail for maybe 40 yards before Jasper stopped cold. Wouldn't move another inch. Tail between his legs, eyes locked on something in the brush I couldn't see. That's when I heard it again. The clicking. Only this time it was closer, directly ahead. And there was something else with it, a breathing sound. Low, wet, like someone exhaling through bloody water. I raised a gun and backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the trees. I didn't run, not yet, but I felt like prey. That night was the worst. I was lying in bed, shotgun leaning against the nightstand, Jasper at my feet, when the smell hit me. Rot, wet fur, moldy wood and iron. It poured in through the open vent above the bed like smoke. Jasper started whining, pawing at the door, then barking frantically. I heard footsteps on the roof. Then something landed on the porch with a heavy thud. I shot up, grabbed the gun, and flipped the porch light on. The bulb burst, and in the brief flash before the glass exploded, I saw it, standing at the base of the steps, 8 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark, matted fur, the head of a wolf, too long, too angular, with ears that twitched independently. The mouth hung half open, revealing rows of uneven yellow teeth. But the eyes, God, the eyes, they smiled. Not like a dog, not like a man, like something pretending to be both. Something trying to mimic what it had seen on faces before it ripped them off. I slammed the door, bolted every lock, and sat with the gun in my lap until sunrise. When Tom came home 3 days later, I tried to play it off. He didn't ask much, just stared at the scratches on the porch, ran a hand down one of the gouges in the shed, then nodded to himself like he'd seen it all before. That night he made us coffee, then poured a shot of whiskey into both our mugs and sat with me on the porch. "You heard the tapping?" he asked. I nodded. "You smelled it?" "Yes." He took a long sip and looked out at the trees. "It never comes through the door, not unless you open it." I moved out west not long after that, but I never stopped watching the trees. I never sleep with the window open, and if I ever hear tapping on the glass past midnight, My name is Isaac Rowe, and until last fall, I'd never believed in monsters. Not really sure. I'd heard the stories. My grandfather used to talk about creatures in the hills, back when I was just a kid, growing up in Tennessee. He'd sit on his porch with a corncob pipe and that old hunting rifle across his knees, talking about shadows that moved without sound, or eyes that watched from the trees, even when there was no wind. No animals, no reason to feel afraid except you did, deep down in your bones. He called them the hollow ones. I thought it was just a spooky story for keeping kids out of the woods. I don't think that anymore. This happened in October of 2022. My cousin Tyler and I had taken a long weekend to go bow hunting. We'd been planning it for months. He knew of a spot up in the Cumberland Plateau, far from any town, cell towers, or curious tourists, where the deer were thick and the woods still felt ancient. Said it was near a place locals called Widow's Bend. I should have known from the name alone. The cabin was old, but well kept. His uncle's place, apparently, though we never saw the man. Tyler just had the keys. One long gravel road, 2 locked gates, and 5 miles from the nearest neighbor. It was perfect, or at least it should have been. Our first 2 days were uneventful. We hiked the ridge, set up 2 stands, and scouted some trails near a dry creek bed. The air had that crisp, electric bite to it that only comes in autumn. Leaves underfoot, birdsong overhead. Everything felt peaceful. But that changed on the 3rd night. It started with the silence. You hear people say that all the time, but you don't really understand what they mean until it happens. 1 second we were sitting by the fire, listening to owls in the trees and the wind in the branches, and the next, nothing. No bugs, no frogs, no wind, like the woods had been vacuum sealed. Just the crackle of our fire and the sound of my own breathing. Then Jasper, Tyler's coonhound, started growling, low, uneasy. His ears flattened. His body went stiff. Tyler looked up from cleaning his broadheads. "You hear that?" "No," I said, but I knew what he meant. We both stood and looked out into the trees. There was movement. Not loud, not careless, just deliberate, like something wanted us to hear it. Low footsteps crunching leaves, a branch creaking. Then the footsteps would stop and start again on the other side, circling. Jasper started barking, full-throated and wild, snapping at the dark. I grabbed the lantern and swept it toward the tree line, and for half a second I thought I saw something tall, too tall. I didn't get a good look, just a flash of fur, a glint of amber eyes that didn't reflect light. They held it, like two hot coals floating in the dark. Then it was gone. We spent that night inside with the shotgun out and the fire burning low. Jasper wouldn't stop pacing. Every time he passed the window, he'd freeze, stare out into the trees, and whimper. It came back the next night. Only this time it wasn't just watching. It screamed. You ever hear a mountain lion? This wasn't that. This was deeper, longer, like a woman crying and a wolf howling at the same time, played backward on a broken record. It shattered something in me, made my hands shake. My stomach turned to ice. Tyler stood in the corner, pale as a sheet, holding the shotgun so tight I thought it might snap in half. The scream came again. Closer. We didn't sleep. When dawn finally came, we found the deer stand, Tyler's, torn apart. Not broken, shredded. Steel steps twisted, cables frayed. Something had torn it down from the tree and slammed it into the ground hard enough to bury the frame 6 inches into the dirt. There were claw marks in the bark, deep, long, spaced too wide for any bear, too deliberate. Tyler wanted to pack up right then and there, but I convinced him to stay one more night. I don't know why. Pride, maybe. Or maybe I just needed proof I wasn't going crazy. I got it. That night I heard it climb onto the roof. The whole cabin creaked under the weight. Shingles scraped, wood groaned. Then it moved to the porch. We turned out the lanterns and sat there in the dark, hearts pounding, Jasper shaking like a leaf. Then it tapped on the window 3 times, tap, tap, like it had fingers. Then it laughed. I can't describe the sound. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was like a child trying to mimic a laugh after only hearing it once. Like it knew what laughter was, but didn't understand why we did it. Tyler ran for the truck. I followed. Jasper bolted ahead like a streak of lightning. We didn't even grab our gear. I don't remember unlocking the gate. I don't remember the road. Just to look on Tyler's face as we barreled down the mountain with the brights on and the trees flashing past us like prison bars. We didn't talk much after that. Not for months. Fire inspectors found the well cap ripped off and shattered 50 yards from where it had been cemented in place. He asked me if I remembered what Grandpa used to say about the hollow ones, about things older than the forest that never died, just waited. I remembered, and now I think he was telling the truth all along. I worked nights as a security patrol officer for a construction company that leases heavy equipment to sites all over western Pennsylvania. It's mostly boring work, driving from one yard to another, checking that no one's messing with the gear, logging a few photos, and moving on. That night I was scheduled for a loop out toward an old gravel quarry that had been shut down for years. The company recently started leasing space there, again for equipment storage. I'd done the run a couple times already and didn't love it. The road in was long, narrow, and poorly maintained, with woods pressing in tight on both sides. No lights, no nearby houses, just a gravel lot full of silent machines and shadows. I arrived around 2:40 a.m. The lot was quiet, the moon just peeking through cloud cover. I killed the engine and stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on the gravel. I logged my check-in, snapped a few pictures of the excavators and loaders, then walked the perimeter like I always did. That's when I noticed it. One of the newer bulldozers had these long scratches along the blade, not from use. These were deliberate. Parallel grooves, deep and spaced apart. I crouched down, shining my flashlight along the edge. Whatever made them had claws, not tools, and the marks were fresh, still flaking metal. I stood up and took a slow look around. The woods at the edge of the lot were silent, too silent. I chalked it up to maybe a bear, logged it, and started heading back toward my truck. That's when I heard it, the sound of something heavy stepping through underbrush. Not a deer. Too slow. Too purposeful. Then a low growl, deep and guttural, rolled out from the trees like thunder muffled in a blanket. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my grip as I aimed it at the tree line, catching nothing but bare trunks and bramble. Then a shape, just for a second, huge, low to the ground, but not on all fours, watching. I backed up slowly toward my truck, trying not to panic. My keys were in my jacket. I reached for them, and that's when it stepped out of the trees. It moved like it had all the time in the world. At first I thought I was looking at some kind of upright bear, but bears don't move like that, don't stand like that. Its legs bent backward, joints popping unnaturally as it shifted. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and covered in dark matted fur, soaked around the shoulders like it had been standing in water. Its head was wolfish, but wrong. Too angular, too expressive. The eyes reflected orange in the flashlight beam. Intelligent, cold, curious. It stopped at the edge of the gravel, sniffing the air like it was deciding if I was worth the effort. I took another step back. The creature cocked its head. Its lips curled just enough to show a line of pointed, glistening teeth. I ran. I don't remember unlocking the truck door or climbing inside. I just remember slamming it shut and jamming the key into the ignition. The headlights flicked on, and there it was, now at the center of the lot, crouched low like it had just bounded forward. It didn't chase me. It just stood there in my high beams, breathing heavy, steam curling from its nose, watching as I floored it in reverse and peeled down the narrow road like my life depended on it. Because maybe it did. I didn't report it, not officially. Who would believe me? I said the scratches were from vandals and let it go. But I haven't been back to that quarry since. Someone else handles that route now. I've started hearing things, though. Drivers refusing to do the graveyard shift out near the ridge. Equipment getting damaged in ways no one can explain. Tools missing. Deep claw marks left on machines we keep locked behind fences. Sometimes I think I should have done more. Reported it. Told someone higher up, but then I remember those eyes. That moment it chose not to chase me. It could have, and I think maybe it let me go. But not because it was done with me. No, because it wanted me to know. I've lived most of my life in East Texas, and I know what the woods are supposed to sound like. You grow up in a place like this. You learn the rhythms, cicadas in the summer, owls at night, the distant yip of coyotes cutting through the pine thickets after dark. Silence, real silence, that's what tells you something's wrong. It was early November when it happened. I was working for the county on a part-time maintenance crew, mostly water management stuff, inspections, meter checks, clearing debris near the reservoirs. The kind of work that's boring but predictable. I liked it. Until that day. The job was simple. Check the telemetry unit on an old water tower about 20 miles outside of town. It was tucked back off an overgrown service road behind a stretch of undeveloped timberland. Just me, a packed lunch, and the truck's AM radio humming gospel tunes through the static. The sun was out. Everything felt normal. Until I got there, right away I noticed something strange. No birds. Not a single chirp, not even the usual buzz of bugs near the scrub brush. The whole place felt hushed, like someone had sucked the sound out of the air. I parked under the shadow of the tower, grabbed my clipboard, and stepped out into the quiet. The tower was one of those old welded steel jobs, narrow legs and a rusted cylinder on top. It hadn't been replaced because it still functioned, barely. County just wanted someone to check the pressure sensor and make sure no critters had chewed through the wiring. About halfway through the inspection, I found the claw marks. I was kneeling near one of the support beams, trying to follow a conduit line when I saw them. 4 deep gouges in the metal, low to the ground, about a foot long and spaced apart like fingers. Not cat claws, not even bear. These were longer, deeper, like something had gripped the steel. I stood up and looked around. The clearing stretched maybe 100 yards in every direction before the tree line swallowed it up. Tall pines, brittle oaks, no movement, no wind. I suddenly felt watched. Now, I'm not a superstitious guy. I've hunted, camped, tracked hogs through these woods at 3 a.m. in the rain. But that day, something felt off. I packed up my tools and decided to finish the paperwork back in the truck. That's when I heard it crack. Not a twig, not a branch falling. A snap, sharp and close, from the tree line behind the tower. I turned around slow, scanning the shadows. Nothing, but I could feel it. You ever get that sensation that something's staring at you, like it's pushing its presence into your skull? I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, just listening. Then the growl came, low, rattling, vibrating through the windshield like it was coming from beneath the earth. It came from the tree line. I turned the key. The truck hesitated. One of those half-turns where the starter stutters, and I felt my heart jump into my throat. Then the engine caught and roared to life. I threw it into reverse, turned, and got the hell out of there, gravel spinning under the tires. I didn't look back. At least, not then. I tried to write the whole thing off. Told myself it was probably a coyote or a wild dog or maybe just a trick of the light, but I couldn't get those claw marks out of my mind. I took a photo with my phone before I left and stared at it that night in bed, trying to rationalize it. I zoomed in, enhanced the contrast. There was no denying it. Whatever made those marks had fingers, long, thick fingers tipped with claws. I didn't sleep. 3 days later, I got a call from one of the other crew guys. Name's Dennis. Said he had a weird one for me. "You were out at Tank 6, right?" he asked. "Yeah, why?" "We found one of the deer feeders torn up about half a mile from there. Metal's bent like someone hit it with a sledgehammer. And there's blood everywhere, but no deer." No tracks? Just weird ones. Kinda like hell, I don't know, man. Just come take a look. I met him that afternoon. The clearing where the feeders sat looked like something had exploded. The feeder pole was bent sideways, torn open at the base, and the ground was churned up like a rodeo had come through. Dennis pointed to the prints, wide, humanoid, but longer than a man's foot and sunken deeper into the soil than any barefoot human could manage. And then there was the smell. I don't know how to describe it. Wet fur, rotting meat, and a coppery tang like old blood. It clung to everything. That night, I didn't sleep again. And this time I heard something outside my house, not on the road, not in the woods, outside my bedroom window. A shuffle of dirt, a breath against the glass. I live alone out on a rural property at the edge of the county. No neighbors for a quarter mile. No dogs, no wind that night. But something was out there. I stayed frozen under the sheets until sunrise. I tried to tell the sheriff. He nodded, wrote something in a little notepad, told me he'd keep an eye out for any predators. But I could see in his face he didn't believe a word. Hell, I don't blame him. But 2 nights later, something attacked the livestock pen behind the Miller farm. 8 goats, all torn apart. The fence shredded like paper, and they found claw marks, same kind, same depth, on the metal gate. You want to hear the worst part? There was a trail leading away from the pen, straight toward Tank 6. I went back. Yeah, I know. Call it stupid, call it curiosity, call it needing to know. I took my rifle, 2 flashlights, and a trail cam, parked half a mile away and hiked in before sunset. I waited until dark, found a spot behind an old log near the water tower and stayed completely still. The air was thick. The silence was worse than before. Then just after midnight I saw it. It stepped out of the trees like it owned the place. Tall, maybe 8 feet. Broad shoulders, long arms that nearly brushed its knees. Covered in fur, dark and coarse, and glinting in the moonlight like wet moss. The head was unmistakably canine. Elongated snout, pointed ears, wide mouth that curled back in a sneer of teeth. But the eyes, God, the eyes, they were human. Not just intelligent, aware. It moved with purpose, stalking the perimeter of the tower like it was guarding it. Then it paused, sniffed the air, and looked straight at me. I didn't move. It stepped closer, closer. The air turned to ice. My muscles locked. I couldn't even lift the rifle. I swear for a second I felt it inside my head. Not like reading my mind, more like it was feeling me, measuring me, judging whether I was a threat or not. Then it blinked. And it smiled. I swear to God, it smiled. Not an animal grin, something else, something mocking. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees, silent as smoke. I've never been back to that tower. I turned in my resignation. 2 days later, no explanation. Dennis understood. He's since put in for transfer. Whatever that thing is, it's still out there. I don't think it's a random creature. I think it's guarding something, watching something. Maybe the water tank is just part of its territory. Maybe it's older than the tower, older than the town. Maybe it's just been. If you ever find yourself alone in the woods and everything suddenly goes quiet, no birds, no bugs, no wind, leave. Don't investigate. Don't look back. Don't try to explain it. because some things out there don't belong to the world we understand. And one of them is watching that rusted tower off Route 54, waiting for anyone dumb enough to get too close. I still dream about those eyes every single night, and in the dream, they're always getting closer. I'm not going to tell you my full name. You can call me Rick. I served 22 years in the U.S. Army, most of that time as a reconnaissance specialist. That means I was the guy they dropped into the woods first, usually alone, with nothing but a rifle, a pack, and orders to watch. I was trained to notice patterns, track movement, survive off the land, and disappear without a trace. I saw a lot during my time war, yes, but also things that don't make it into the reports. After I retired in 2011, I settled down near Tahoe, up in the Sierra Nevadas. Quiet place, good folks, plenty of forest. I built a cabin about 6 miles from the nearest road, off-grid, solar-powered, surrounded by pine, and with nothing but my dog, a Belgian Malinois named Jasper, to keep me company. That was my peace. No neighbors, no noise, just the wind, the trees, and the mountains, until 2014. That was the year I stopped sleeping through the night. It started with the sounds. Around October, Jasper began acting jumpy after dusk. He's a fearless dog, ex-military like me, trained in combat zones and used to gunfire. But something about the woods around the cabin made him uneasy. He'd sit by the door at night, ears rigid, lips pulled back in a silent snarl, like he was waiting for something to come through the wall. And I mean every night. Always between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m. At first, I assumed it was a bear. Black bears aren't uncommon up here, and they'll come sniffing around if they think you've left food out. But this was different. No scratch marks on the trees. No upturned garbage. No tracks I could identify. Just broken branches, tufts of fur I couldn't classify. And this god-awful smell. Imagine wet dog mixed with blood and moldy meat left in the sun. That smell would linger just outside the cabin, then vanish by morning. Jasper wouldn't go outside at night anymore. He'd just sit there, shaking and growling low. So I set up trail cams. Military-grade stuff, infrared, heat sensors, all of it. I positioned them around the property, high up, with wide angles. And for 2 nights, nothing. Just deer, raccoons, a fox or 2. Then night 3 hit. I woke to the alarm around 2:37 a.m. Jasper was already pacing, whining. I grabbed the monitor and froze. Something was standing just inside the tree line. I say something because no human I've ever seen has eyes like that. The camera didn't catch detail, just heat, but the shape was all wrong. It was hunched, with long arms that almost touched the ground, and a head too narrow to be a bear. Its body temp registered colder than expected, like it shouldn't have been alive at all. It moved fast, too fast, from one side of the frame to the other in half a second. I grabbed my rifle, threw on boots, and stepped out into the cold. Jasper stayed inside. The forest was dead silent. No wind, no bugs, no owls. Just me and that creeping dread crawling up my spine. I swept the perimeter, night vision on, and that's when I heard it. Crunch. Something stepped on dry pine needles just 20 yards ahead. Then again, crunch, snap. I raised my rifle. "Come on out," I called. "You're trespassing on private land. I'm armed." Nothing. Then a deep growl rumbled from the shadows. Not a bear growl, lower, almost wet, like something was growling through a throat full of blood. It hit me square in the chest. I've faced insurgents with RPGs, and I've never felt fear like that. I fired a warning shot into the ground. The growl stopped. But the thing didn't run. It started moving slow, deliberate steps around me. I kept the rifle trained ahead, but I could hear the footfalls circling. I backed toward the cabin. That's when I caught a glimpse of it through the trees. 7 feet tall at least, walking on 2 legs, arms swinging unnaturally long. Its fur was patchy and dark, like someone had sewn together parts of a wolf and a man and then left it to rot. Its snout was too short for a canine, but the teeth, Jesus. I saw those teeth flash in the moonlight, crooked, jagged, yellow. The thing was grinning at me. I didn't fire again. I didn't run. I did what instinct told me. I broke line of sight and retreated to the cabin. I know how predators work. When they watch, they're learning. I wasn't going to give it another show. Back inside, I locked every bolt, covered the windows, and sat up all night with Jasper curled against my legs like a puppy. The cams were shredded the next morning. Every single one ripped clean off the tree. One had claw marks 6 inches deep gouged into the bark. I called a friend, a buddy from my recon unit, who now works with wildlife conservation. I told him everything. He didn't laugh. He told me stories from the Rockies, Appalachia, parts of Alaska. Same kind of descriptions, tall, upright, canine-looking things that stalk people in remote areas. Sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs. Always just out of reach, always watching. He called them runners. I asked why. "Because if you see one," he said, "you run." I packed up that weekend and moved back into town. I still go out to the mountains, but not alone, never at night, and never near that cabin. I sold it to some tech guy from the Bay Area, young kid. Seemed excited to rough it. I didn't say a damn thing. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe not. But here's what I know. That thing is still out there, watching, waiting. And if you ever find yourself out in those woods in the dead hours of night and the forest suddenly goes quiet, don't turn on your flashlight, don't speak, and don't stop moving. I'm not the kind of guy who believes in monsters. Never was. I'm a father, a history teacher, a pretty average dude. 42 years old, married for 12 of those, 2 kids, decent job, a backyard grill, the whole deal. I live in the Hudson Valley, not far from the Catskills. I hike on the weekends. That's my peace, me, a trail, and some quiet away from the world. No emails, no lesson plans, no screaming kids. This happened in September of 2021. The leaves were just starting to turn that red-orange shimmer you only get up here before the air really starts to bite. I decided to check out a less-traveled path near Pikamoose, something I'd found on a hiker's forum marked as unofficial but scenic. That's the first mistake I made. The second was going alone. The trail was overgrown, but manageable. Old logging road, judging by the cuts in the hill and how the trees curved unnaturally away from the center. No cell reception after the first mile, but that's normal out there. I had gear, water, a folding knife, my headlamp. I wasn't some greenhorn out here trying to play survivalist. About an hour in, I noticed the smell. Like wet leaves and rotting meat, strong, sudden, and wrong. It wasn't just decay, it was chemical, acidic, made the inside of my nose burn. I figured maybe a dead deer was off trail. Happens sometimes. I kept walking. That's when I found the scratches. They were deep, real deep, carved into the bark of a sugar maple, not bear scratches. I've seen those. These were higher, thicker, more deliberate. Parallel, maybe 4 inches apart, dug so deep you could fit your fingers in them. And they weren't old. There were more trees like that up the path. Bent branches, torn bark. Patches where the moss had been scraped off the rock like something had dug its claws in to climb or stop a slide. But what really got me was the silence, no birds, no wind. Just the sound of my boots and my own breath. That's when I heard the whistle. 3 notes. Low, slow, repeating. At first I thought it was another hiker, maybe calling a dog. But then it came again. Same tone, same rhythm, like it was mimicking the sound, not making it. I stopped cold, heart pounding, and turned to look behind me. Nothing, just forest. I started back down, fast. Then I heard it behind me. Crunch, crunch, pause. Like heavy footfalls trying to match my steps. I stopped. So did it. Hello? I called out. Nothing. Then, from the trees ahead, same whistle. Same pattern. But this time it came from a different direction. I moved. Quickly. Branches started to snap behind me. Louder now. Whatever it wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. It was moving fast, through brush, over rock, and catching up, I broke into a jog. Then a sprint. There's a part of the trail that slopes steeply down before hitting the stream. I hit it hard, barely keeping my footing, nearly rolled my ankle on a slick rock, and that's when I saw it. Down across the water in the trees opposite me. Tall, wrong, gray-black fur. Long arms dangling low, almost to its knees. I thought it was a bear at first, but no bear sits like that. And no bear has a head shaped like that. Long, angular, with ears like a German shepherd, pointed and alert. Its chest was huge, heaving slowly, like it had just run miles without breaking a sweat. But the worst part? It was smiling, not snarling, smiling, wide, teeth like broken glass. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then it stood up, 7 feet, 8 maybe, towering, lean, bones under skin like rebar under concrete, and it whistled. 3 notes, the same exact pattern I'd heard before. It was toying with me. I turned and ran faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't look back, not once. I tore through the woods, got cut on branches, rolled through brush, and busted my knee on a fallen log, but I didn't stop until I saw my car through the trees. When I got inside and slammed the door, I didn't even start the engine right away. I just sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon. My shirt was soaked. My hands were shaking. And as I reached for the key, I caught something in the rearview mirror. Movement. In the tree line, a dark figure watching, still, silent. I started the engine and floored it. Didn't stop until I was back on the highway. I didn't tell anyone at first. What would I say? That a monster stalked me in the woods and whistled a song? But I started researching, and I found the stories. Whistling in the forest. Creatures that aren't bears. Things with human eyes and dog faces. Dogmen, they call it. I still hike, but I stay on the main trails now. I carry a sidearm and a flare, and I don't go out past 4 p.m. in those woods. There's something real out there. I saw it, heard it, smelled it, and I'll tell you this much, in case you're ever out there and you hear 3 whistles in the dark. Don't answer back. I've lived in western North Carolina my entire life, just over the state line from Tennessee, tucked into the arms of the Blue Ridge Mountains. My family owns a few acres of wooded land near the edge of Nantahala National Forest. It's quiet out here, nothing but the distant cry of a hawk overhead, the whisper of wind in the trees, and the occasional sound of a truck struggling up the gravel roads. Most of the time it's peaceful, serene even. But every now and then the woods remind you that you're not really alone. I learned that the hard way. It started last fall. I'd taken a week off work to help my uncle restore his old hunting cabin up near Tusquatee Bald. It's way off the main road, no electricity, no cell service, and barely even a footpath to get you there. It had been in our family for decades, but no one had used it since my grandfather passed. My uncle wanted to bring it back to life, maybe use it again during deer season. The plan was simple. Hike in, clean out the place, replace some floorboards, and fix up the roof before winter hit. I'd be alone the first 2 nights while my uncle finished up business in town. I didn't mind. I'd camped out there plenty of times growing up. The only difference now was I'd be doing it without my grandpa's old hunting rifle by my side. I hiked up late that afternoon, just as the sun was dipping behind the ridge. The trail was familiar, though a little more overgrown than I remembered. By the time I reached the cabin, the shadows were stretching long across the trees, painting everything in gold and gray. I got a fire going in the stone pit out front, cooked up some beans, and settled into a creaky old cot inside. That night, something felt off. I couldn't explain it at first. It wasn't the cold. I'd brought a thick sleeping bag. It wasn't the dark either. I've never been afraid of the dark. No, it was the quiet. Too quiet. Anyone who spent time in the deep woods knows there's always sound. Crickets, owls, frogs, the night comes alive when the sun dips. But that night, the forest held its breath. Not a chirp, not a hoot, nothing, just the low crackle of the fire and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I lay there, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a bear had passed through, maybe a bobcat. They'll quiet the woods down for a while. Then I heard it, a crunch. Not like a squirrel darting through the underbrush. Not like a branch falling from a tree. It was the sound of a footstep, deliberate, heavy, slow. I sat up in bed, instinctively holding my breath. Another step. Then another. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it through the dusty window, sweeping the woods in front of the cabin. Nothing. Then the footsteps stopped. I waited, still holding my breath, afraid to move. After a long minute, I turned off the flashlight and sat there in the dark, listening. Nothing else came. Eventually, I lay back down, but I didn't sleep. I watched the walls of that cabin until the sky turned pale blue. By morning, the birds were back. The wind rustled through the trees again. It felt almost normal, enough that I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep-deprived and jumpy from being alone, that's all. I spent the day clearing brush, patching the roof, and replacing the front steps. I even found an old tin box of my grandpa's tucked behind a loose board in the wall. Inside were fishing lures, a pocket knife, and a little notebook. Most of it was just hunting notes and weather observations, but near the back, one entry caught my eye. Heard it again last night. Walks the ridge behind the cabin. Always stops when the light's on. Don't know what it is. Ain't a bear. Ain't a man. Too tall. Too quiet. Don't like how it watches. Might need to move camp if it comes back. September 16th, 1984. I read that entry over and over, feeling my stomach twist. My grandfather was a practical man, not prone to superstition. If he'd written something like that, I knew it had shaken him. That night I lit a fire again, but I kept the flashlight and my axe close by. The woods were alive like normal at first. The crickets chirped, the wind rustled the leaves, and an owl hooted up on the ridge. But around midnight, it stopped again. That same unnatural silence. No wind, no bugs, just nothing. Then came the footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. But this time they didn't stop at the edge of the trees. They came closer. I rose slowly, axe in hand, moving toward the front window. I flicked on my flashlight and aimed it into the darkness. Something stood just beyond the firelight. Tall, thin, taller than any man should be. Its limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way, as if it had been put together wrong. Its skin was stretched tight, pale and mottled, like meat left out too long. I couldn't see its face, not clearly, but I swear its eyes glowed faintly in the beam of my light. It stood still, unmoving, watching. I didn't move either. My breath hitched in my throat, and my hands went numb around the handle of the axe. Then it stepped back, one slow step into the dark, then another, and then it turned and melted into the trees. The sounds of the woods returned a few minutes later, as if someone had flipped a switch. Crickets, wind, the distant hoot of the owl. I stayed up the rest of the night, axe in hand, eyes wide, staring out that window. My uncle arrived just after sunrise the next morning. I didn't even let him unload his truck before I insisted we leave. I didn't tell him exactly what I saw. I just said there'd been something in the woods, something that didn't feel right. I haven't been back to that cabin since, and I won't. Whatever walks the ridge at night, it was there long before we were, and it doesn't want us there. I grew up in a tiny Appalachian town that barely shows up on maps anymore. It's one of those places you pass through on your way to somewhere more important, a dot on a back road flanked by dense pine-covered mountains and stretches of rust-colored shale. But ask anyone who grew up there, and they'll tell you the same thing. Don't go near Lantern Hill after dark. That's not the name on any map, mind you. That's just what we called it. The hill got its name from the lights, pale, flickering ones that drifted through the trees on moonless nights, like someone carrying a lantern through the woods. But the lanterns didn't belong to anyone. They floated too high, moved too smooth. Sometimes there were 2, sometimes a dozen. People said they were spirits or miners who got trapped in a collapse back in the 1800s, still searching for the way out. Some said it was just gas from underground coal veins, igniting and glowing. Others weren't so sure. I didn't believe any of it. Not really. I chalked it all up to small-town boredom and old-timers trying to scare kids into staying close to home. But then I became a paramedic, and 3 years ago I had a call that changed the way I think about those lights forever. It was a cold October night. One of those nights where the clouds hang low and the mist rolls off the mountains like smoke. I was working an overnight shift, the kind where the roads are dead quiet and every little sound in the ambulance feels way louder than it should. Around 1:30 a.m., the radio crackled. Unit 7, report of an injured hiker off Cinder Hollow Road, near Lantern Hill. The dispatcher hesitated when she said the name, like she wasn't sure if she should. I remember glancing at my partner, Tom. He gave me a raised eyebrow, then shrugged. Probably some college kid screwing around in the woods, he muttered, popping a cough drop in his mouth. Bet you $10 it's nothing. I took the wheel, and we drove out into the night. The roads narrowed as we got deeper into the woods. Asphalt gave way to gravel, then to packed dirt. Fog pooled between the trees, and the air outside the cracked windows smelled like wet leaves and iron. By the time we reached the trailhead, there was no one in sight, just our headlights cutting through mist and brush. We grabbed our gear and started hiking. The trail was steep and rocky, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Trees leaned in from both sides, their trunks slick with moss, branches arching overhead like skeletal hands. After 20 minutes we saw it, a single lantern, just floating there, faint, like a firefly trapped in glass. Tom stopped dead in his tracks. What the hell? It was maybe 40 yards ahead, just off the trail. I called out, "Hey, Ems, you okay?" No answer, just the soft bobbing of that lantern light. We moved closer, flashlights sweeping through the woods. But when we reached the spot where we'd seen the glow, there was nothing. No lantern, no person, not even footprints. Tom knelt down and brushed his hand across the mossy ground. Nothing. Then, from somewhere behind us, a voice called out, "Help, please." It was hoarse, weak, close. We turned on a dime, lights spinning toward the source. Another lantern. This one flickered on and off like a dying light bulb, but it was higher now, nearly 10 feet off the ground. I don't know what it was about that light, but something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't just light. It was watching us. The voice came again, "Help me," but it didn't sound human anymore. There was something broken about it. The rhythm of the words didn't match the tone. It was like someone had heard a human call for help once and was trying to copy it, and failing. Tom looked shaken. "This isn't right, man. We should call this in." I nodded, reaching for the radio on my belt. That's when the forest went silent. I mean dead silent. No wind, no leaves rustling, no distant creak, nothing. Like the whole mountain had sucked in a breath and held it, and then the lanterns multiplied. 1, 2, 5, 9, all around us between the trees, hanging in the air like stars that had fallen just a little too far, some high, some low, all of them swaying in perfect sync like they were breathing. Then they started moving, not toward us, not away. They began circling, fast, erratic, like they were trying to hurt us. That's when the whispering began. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't a voice. It was voices layered on top of each other, all whispering different things, some in English, some in gibberish, some in tones that made my stomach turn. I grabbed Tom's arm. "We need to go, now." He didn't argue. We turned and ran, stumbling back down the trail, flashlights bouncing, the fog swallowing everything behind us. But the lights followed. They flitted between the trees, darting through the brush, always just at the edge of sight. I felt them in my bones, like the air itself had teeth and was biting down on my spine. We burst back onto the trailhead and dove into the ambulance, slamming the doors shut. The moment we turned the engine on and flicked on the high beams, the lights disappeared. Gone, like they were never there. Back at the station, we filed the report. No one found. False alarm. We didn't mention the lights, or the voices, or the fact that Tom couldn't stop shaking for hours. We weren't believed anyway. A week later, a hiker was found near Lantern Hill, or what was left of him. No ID, no wallet, just shredded fabric, claw marks, and a shredded notebook with only one legible sentence. "It wears the light, so we'll follow it." We still get calls up that way from time to time, and every time someone else goes missing. Now, when people ask me about the stories from back home, I don't laugh them off like I used to, because I've seen the lanterns. And I know now some lights are meant to guide you home. Others lead you somewhere you were never meant to come back from. I've always liked hiking alone. Something about being deep in the woods with nothing but the sound of my own breath and boots crunching along a dirt path calms me. There's no traffic, no buzzing phones, no constant noise, just space to breathe. I grew up in eastern Kentucky, not far from Letcher County, right on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. The kind of place where kids still ride their bikes past cool shuttered mines and you can hear cicadas humming from dusk till dawn. It's the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and doesn't let go. But there are places around here you just don't hike into. I learned that the hard way. It was late October, just as the leaves were peaking, all rust reds and burnt oranges bleeding down the mountainsides. I'd been working long shifts at the hardware store, trying to keep up with bills, and I needed a day off in the worst way. So I dusted off my pack and decided to hike an old trail my papa used to talk about Cotton Ridge. The thing is, Cotton Ridge isn't on any map. My grandfather told me about it when I was a kid, sitting on his porch in the fall air, chewing Red Man tobacco and pointing to the tree line. You see them breaks in the ridge? That's where the old cotton trail starts. Don't go up there, though. They buried the wrong thing in the wrong place, and it never stayed down. I thought he was just being colorful, like old men do. Mountain people have a way of turning warnings into poetry. But that morning, standing at the base of the ridge with a thermos full of coffee and the trail in front of me, I didn't think twice. The path was barely there, half swallowed by years of overgrowth. You had to duck under branches and step over roots like nature was trying to take it back. But once you were about a mile in, it cleared, wide enough for two, winding just beside an old, dry creek bed. It felt untouched, pure, and silent. That was the first thing that bothered me. I've been in the woods my whole life. You get used to a rhythm of sound. Crows cawing, squirrels darting, the occasional rustle of a deer. But this place, nothing. No birds. No wind. Just my footsteps, and they sounded too loud. I kept going, brushing it off. I told myself I'd just get to the overlook Papa always mentioned, have lunch, and head back before dark. But about 2 hours in, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. The trees started changing. The bark was stripped from most of them, not like weather damage or lightning scars. It was peeled back in long, deliberate spirals, like something had scraped around and around high up, 10, 12 feet. Then there were the symbols, carved into trunks every few hundred yards. Some looked like crosses, others like arrows pointing backward, not forward, backward. One tree had a circle with an X cut through it, and my first thought was, this is a warning. I stopped, stood there a minute, listening to nothing. Then I heard it, a branch breaking, but not close, right behind me. I turned around fast, light-headed, scanning the brush. My pulse was thumping in my ears. Nothing moved. No wind, but I could feel something was watching. I told myself to keep walking. I told myself it was just a deer or a bear or my imagination getting the best of me. But then I found the cabin. It wasn't on any map. It didn't look like it should have even still been standing. The roof was half caved in, vines wrapping the walls like ropes. A single window blown out, the door off its hinges, leaning against the frame, and above the door was a symbol, the same as before, a circle with an X. I should have turned back. Every part of me was screaming to leave, but I went inside. The floor creaked under my boots. It smelled like wet wood and old blood. There was a table in the center of the room, rotted and sagging, and in the corner was something covered in a canvas sheet. I approached slowly. My hand trembled as I reached for the edge, and when I pulled the tarp away, I saw bones. Dozens of them, animal mostly, but some too big for deer, long with knuckles, fingers, and carved into the skull in the center, the same eeks in a circle. I stumbled back, knocking the table over, scattering bits of old things across the floor, and that's when I heard the first voice. Not from someone inside my head. It was low, like a whisper made of teeth. You weren't invited. I ran, didn't look back, just tore out of that shack and down the trail, lungs burning, limbs numb. I don't know how long I ran, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. But then I realized I was going in circles, the same tree, the same rock, that same rotten symbol staring at me from a broken trunk. I was trapped. I dropped to my knees, tried to catch my breath, and that's when the silence broke. There was a rustling behind me, leaves crunching under heavy steps. Slow, measured. It didn't sound like someone walking. It sounded like someone dragging something long and wet. Then I heard breathing. Heavy, wet, close. I turned slowly and I saw it. Not a man, not an animal, something in between. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, covered in black hair, but patches were missing, revealing gray flesh underneath. Its arms were too long, ending in fingers that dragged the ground. And its head, God, its head. It looked like a skull, stretched and twisted with hollow sockets and no mouth, just a slit of skin that trembled as it breathed. On its chest was that same symbol, carved deep and raw. Bleeding, it didn't chase me. It watched, like it was deciding. Then it whispered again, not aloud, inside my head. You came alone. You stay alone. I ran again, and this time I found the path out. Just like that, like it let me go. I didn't stop until I hit the trailhead, collapsed against my truck, and vomited in the dirt. I never went back. I don't hike anymore. I dream about it sometimes, the cabin, the bones, the trees with the spiral bark. And every dream ends the same. I see that figure, and it opens its slit of a mouth for the first time, and screams. I've been a backcountry ranger in the Blue Ridge Mountains for 16 years now. Most days, it's just the usual trail maintenance, idiot campers forgetting to douse their fires, and the occasional rescue when someone gets lost chasing waterfalls off the map. It's quiet work, mostly. Peaceful, even. But once in a while, something finds you out there. Something that doesn't belong. This story starts on a Thursday in early November. The cold was creeping in hard this year, frost already lining the leaves by dusk. I'd been stationed out near High Ridge, one of the more remote areas in the southern Appalachian stretch. Beautiful country, but the locals steer clear of it after Halloween. Say the woods, wake up. Around them, just old folklore. Or so I thought. They'd been camping along a stretch of creek near an old fire tower that hadn't been used in years. I knew the place. Hell, I used to take my lunch there when I first started. Dispatch said they'd been out of contact for 36 hours. No cell signal, of course. Their last GPS ping put them near the old Miller trailhead. I packed a heavier loadout than usual radio, sidearm, extra light. The sun was already kissing the tree line when I started hiking in. By the time I reached the campsite, the moon was out full and fat, the kind that paints everything silver, but somehow makes the shadows darker. The first sign that something was off, dead silence. No bugs, no owls, no breeze, just the slow crunch of my boots and my own breath. Then I saw the tents, or what was left of them, ripped open like something had hooked them with claws and just tore. Gear was scattered, shredded sleeping bags, boots lying yards from the tents. No blood, no bodies, just chaos. I radioed in static, not a single bar. That's when I saw the first track. It was massive, twice the size of my boot. Barefoot, not human. The heel print was wrong. It was longer. The toes ended in claw marks that dug deep into the dirt. I knelt down and saw something else. Tufts of coarse, black hair caught on the corner of a tent pole. Thick, matted. I took out my phone and snapped a photo, even though I knew I'd never send it. I followed the prints away from the camp. They led into the woods, deeper into a ravine. That's when I started hearing it. Not the sound of something moving, no snapping twigs or rustling brush. Just breathing, slow, deliberate, deep, like something was following me. I picked up the pace, trying to stay calm. But the deeper I went, the stronger that feeling became, like I was being sized up. I should have turned back, but then I found the phone. One of the campers, face down in the mud, cracked screen. I picked it up, clicked the power button. Nothing, but the photo app was still open. The last image it captured was a blur of motion and glowing amber eyes. Eyes that were far too high off the ground to be any normal animal. That's when I heard the howl dot. It wasn't a coyote. Not even close. It started low, almost mournful. Then it climbed into a guttural snarl that rattled my chest. It echoed off the trees and made the night feel suddenly smaller, like the woods had closed in. I drew my pistol and backed up against a tree, scanning the darkness. Then I saw movement, something low, fast, just a shadow between the trees. I called out, "Ranger Service. If you can hear me, call out." Silence, then something replied, but it wasn't a voice. It was a growl, low and rumbling, followed by the snapping of branches. Whatever it wasn't scared of me. I turned to run and nearly tripped over a body. One of the missing kids. His eyes were open but empty, frozen in shock. His shirt was torn across the chest, deep gashes underneath, but oddly, no blood, like he'd been drained. I wanted to throw up, then I heard it again, closer this time. Breathing, I looked up, and that's when I saw it, standing just beyond the trees. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur. Its arms were too long, ending in clawed hands that twitched as it sniffed the air. But it was the face that haunts me. Like a wolf's, but wrong, elongated, almost stretched. The snout was too narrow. The eyes glowed like hot coals, and when it opened its mouth to snarl, I saw rows of jagged, broken teeth. Some looked human. It stepped forward, slow and deliberate, not afraid, curious. I raised my weapon, yelling, "Back the hell off." It didn't flinch. I fired once, missed. It lunged. I turned and ran, crashing through the brush, branches clawing at my face, blood pounding in my ears. I didn't look back, not until I reached the old fire tower. I slammed the rusted door shut behind me and climbed the ladder 3 rungs at a time. The tower swayed in the wind, old boards creaking. I made it to the top and drew my weapon again, panting, shaking. For a while there was nothing but the wind. Then I heard the thump It had climbed the stairs. The door below creaked open. It was coming. I backed into a corner, weapon raised, flashlight in my other hand, but the moment never came. No attack, no roar, just silence. And then a long, low growl that vibrated the floorboards. It waited down there all night, and just before dawn it left. I waited until full sunlight before coming down. When I made it back to the site, the other two bodies were gone. Only drag marks left in the dirt, heading north into the thickets. I never found them. The department classified it as a wild animal attack. They shut down the area, blamed it on bears, but it wasn't a bear. I know what I saw. I've been back once since then, just once. And when I did, I found a fresh set of tracks, bigger this time. It's still out there, waiting, watching. I've spent my whole life in the southern Appalachians. I grew up in a little town in northern Georgia, where the mountains rise like ancient gods, and the fog rolls in thick enough to swallow the trees whole. Folks out here keep their heads down. They don't ask questions they don't want the answers to, and they don't go looking for trouble in places it tends to live. I've been a ranger in the Chattahoochee National Forest for nearly 9 years now, and in that time I've seen a lot injured bears, lost hikers, flash floods, even a forest fire that almost ate a whole ridge. But none of that ever stuck with me like what happened last fall near the Tallulah Gorge. See, I usually volunteer for the remote solo patrols. Most guys don't like the isolation, but I prefer it. Gives me time to breathe, think. Plus, I've never had much patience for crowds. There's a ridge west of the gorge where a lot of locals go hiking. Steep, overgrown, and just far enough off the map that tourists don't stumble into it. That's where it happened. It was late October. The air had that sharp chill to it, and the leaves were bursting in red and gold like a firework finale. I just finished checking on a backcountry campsite near Panther Creek when I noticed something strange. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, just silence. And in the woods, silence isn't peaceful. It means something's watching. I chalked it up to maybe a bobcat or a black bear and kept walking. The trail I was on followed an old ridgeline that dipped down toward the gorge. There used to be a fire lookout out that way, long since torn down, but the foundation's still there, a little concrete platform surrounded by brush. I figured I'd head there and take my lunch. When I reached the platform, I sat down, took off my pack, and pulled out a sandwich. That's when I noticed something strange on the trees around me. Scratches. Not little claw marks like you'd expect from a bear. These were deep, long, and high off the ground, like something tall had dragged claws across the trunks on its way through. There were 5 distinct trees, all facing toward the gorge, all marked. I took a few photos, made a note, and finished my food quicker than usual. The silence hadn't let up, not a bird, not a breeze, just stillness. Then I heard something down the ridge. Movement. It was heavy, deliberate, snapping branches. Now I've tracked all sorts of animals through these woods, and you get a feel for weight distribution. A bear moves differently than a man. A deer is light and fast. But this sounded wrong. Too heavy for a person, too slow for an animal. Like something that didn't belong here was trying to sneak and failing. I stood up slowly and scanned the woods. At first I saw nothing, but then, just past the tree line, I caught a glimpse of it. At first I thought it was a man, maybe 6.5, 7 feet tall, lean, but it moved oddly, like its limbs weren't put together right. Its shoulders rolled too far, and its head hung low like it was sniffing the earth. I couldn't make out details, just the silhouette. Then it stopped and looked at me, not turned its head, looked. Like it had known I was there the whole time. I didn't move, didn't breathe. We stared at each other for what felt like minutes. Then it did something that chilled me to the bone. It smiled, not like a person, no lips, just its jaw hanging slack, teeth long and pale and too many. Then, just as silently as it had come, it backed into the trees like it was never there. I didn't eat the rest of my lunch. I hiked out of there fast, made it back to my truck by dusk, and didn't tell anyone. Not that day, what would I say? But that night, the dreams started. I was back at the platform, same day, same trees, but I was tied to one of them. I could hear it breathing in the woods, slow, deep, deliberate. Then it would whisper my name in a voice that sounded like someone choking underwater. I woke up drenched in sweat. The dreams didn't stop. Every night it got closer. I finally reported the scratches and strange noise to the district lead. Just said I'd seen large claw marks, maybe poachers messing with the area. They logged it and told me to stay clear of that zone until further notice. I didn't argue. A few days later, though, I heard from a fellow ranger. 2 hikers had gone missing off trail near the gorge, close to where I'd been. Their car was still at the lot. No sign of them on the cameras, no campsite. Just gone. We started the search the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I thought to start looking, but I led the group straight toward the ridge. It took about 3 hours before we found something, clothes, torn to pieces, half buried under leaves and mud. No blood, no bodies, just scraps of fabric, and one hiking boot that still had a foot inside it. We crawled it in, flagged the area, and sent for the K9 unit. But when they arrived, the dogs refused to track, wouldn't go near the ridge. One of them pissed itself and tried to run. That night I had the dream again, but this time I wasn't tied to the tree. I was inside the creature, looking out, seeing the woods from its perspective. Smelling everything, feeling hunger like I'd never felt in my life, and I remember thinking there's one more out here, just one more, like the thing knew I was in its head. I took a few weeks off after that. When I came back, I asked to be reassigned to a different section of the forest, somewhere with people, roads, noise. They gave me the Lake Burton area. Sometimes on cold nights when the fog rolls in, I swear, I can feel it again, watching. Whatever I saw out there in the gorge, it wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a man. It was something older, something that's always been here, and I think It knows my name now. I've worked with the U.S. Forest Service for most of my adult life. Wildland firefighting, trail recovery, rescue patrols, you name it. There's something about the wilderness that's always called to me, even when it scared the hell out of me. I was stationed out in the Monongahela National Forest back in 2019. We'd had a particularly dry fall, and the department was on edge, watching for fire risks. The mountains were tinder dry. One careless camper could spark a blaze that would eat the ridges alive. It was late October when I got a report of smoke somewhere near the Laurel Fork Wilderness, an area deep enough in that you'd have to hike half a day just to get to the outer edges. No roads, no cabins, no one should have been out there. I was paired with a guy named Wyatt. Newer recruit, quiet, but good in the field. We set off from the ranger station before sunrise with gear, axe, and enough food for a 2-day patrol. Our goal was to track the smoke, confirm the source, and make sure it wasn't spreading. At first, the hike was calm. Just the sound of boots on damp leaves and the wind whispering through the bare treetops. The forest was still clinging to the last bits of autumn, flashes of orange and red peeking through the gray. But after the first few miles, I noticed something strange. No birds, no bugs, no chipmunks rustling through the underbrush. The forest wasn't alive the way it usually is. Wyatt noticed it, too. "You ever hear it this quiet?" he asked. "Not out here," I replied. It was like we were walking through a photograph, frozen in time. We kept moving, following the ridge that bordered the wilderness boundary. That's when we saw it. Not fire, just smoke. Thick, gray, and clinging to the trees like it was alive. It didn't rise like it should have. It hung low, creeping through the pines, coiling around the trunks and spilling into the hollows. We radioed it in, but got nothing. Static. No weather problems, just dead air. We decided to head deeper. Maybe someone had built an illegal fire. Maybe there was a downed lightning strike we hadn't heard about. But the deeper we went, the less it felt like a wildfire. We reached a ridge that overlooked a shallow valley, and there we saw it, an old, half-rotted wooden cabin, barely more than a shack. It wasn't on any maps. Not even the old trail overlays. No path led to it. It looked like it had been there a century, forgotten by everything but the trees. And smoke was pouring out of its chimney. "I thought you said this place was unoccupied?" Wyatt asked. "It is," I said. "At least it should be." We made our way down slowly. I could feel something in the air, a pressure in my chest, like a coming storm. We approached the cabin cautiously. The windows were covered in something thick and dark, like old resin or pitch. The smoke stank, too, not like firewood, but like something burned wet. Rotten. We knocked. No answer. Wyatt tried the door. It opened on the first push. The inside was worse than I expected. Dust thick on everything. Furniture that looked melted from heat. A dead fire in the hearth barely glowing, and there on the floor in front of the fireplace were bones. Not old ones, either. I crouched and looked closer. They'd been gnawed on, stripped of flesh, human. I turned to tell Wyatt to back out, but he was already gone. Gone. I shouted his name, stepped outside, but he wasn't there. His pack was still on the porch. His flashlight, his radio, everything just dropped like he'd evaporated. I shouted again. Nothing. The smoke in the trees had grown thicker. Now it clung to the ground like fog, wrapping around my boots as I stepped into the clearing. That's when I heard it. Not a voice, not an animal, but something like dry leaves scraping across skin, like breathing, but through waterlogged lungs. Then I saw the trees move. Something was in them, not moving through them, in them, like the trunks stretched and twisted as something passed through, warping the bark as if the forest was skin. Then a face, just for a second, at the edge of the smoke. It looked like Wyatt, but wrong. His face was stretched, his eyes black and sunken, his jaw hanging loose like it was unhinged. He opened his mouth, and what came out wasn't a scream or a shout. It was my voice begging for help. Then he vanished into the smoke again. I ran. I didn't stop. I tore through the trees, uphill through brambles, over rocks. The smoke chased me, thick and clinging. The forest bent around me, closing in like ribs. I heard more voices, all of them mine, some calling, some laughing. It was like something had swallowed the woods, and I was trapped inside its throat. When I finally collapsed, I couldn't breathe. I choked, clawed at my throat, and then the air cleared. The trees opened. I was standing back at the original trailhead, just like that. No smoke, no cabin, nothing but my own labored breathing and the sound of distant birds. I stumbled back to the station and reported what happened. I expected disbelief, maybe a suspension, but when I mentioned the cabin, the bones, and Wyatt disappearing, the supervisor just got quiet. Said he'd seen things up near Laurel Fork, too. Said the maps out here weren't always reliable. Sighed there were places in these mountains that didn't want to be found. Places where the rules broke down. Places that took people. They sent a search team for Wyatt. They never found him. Not even a footprint, just his gear, still on the porch of a cabin that wasn't there the next day. I haven't gone back to that stretch of the forest since. I still patrol. I still hike. But I keep to the mapped trails now. I don't chase smoke unless I see flames. And I don't walk into cabins that don't belong on paper, because I don't know what that thing was, but it wears our faces, and it's still out there. I've spent most of my life in the mountains, born and raised in Buchanan County, Virginia. It's a rugged, forgotten part of the Appalachians, where the forest goes on for miles and the old mining roads crumble into trails few people walk anymore. By the time I was 30, I'd already done a handful of backcountry rescue gigs, spent a couple years clearing trails for the Forestry Service, and hiked just about every ridge from Breaks Interstate Park down to Mount Rogers. But none of that prepared me for what happened in the fall of 2016 when I took my cousin Liam and his friend Brandon into the gorge. Locals just call it the gorge. It's technically part of Jefferson National Forest, a deep cut through the cliffs along the Russell Fork River. It's beautiful, remote, steep, full of caves and forgotten hollows where no one's lived since the coal camps died out. Liam had always been one of those kids into urban legends. When we were little, he'd talk about the mimic man his grandma warned him about, a thing that followed your voice, copied people you trusted, tried to get you alone in the woods. I thought it was just old wives' tales. Anyway, Liam begged me to take him and Brandon camping in the gorge before the weather turned. We'd been close growing up, so I agreed. I thought it'd be good to get away, maybe show them the woods weren't anything to be scared of. We left on a Thursday morning in late October. The sky was gray, the kind of overcast that makes everything feel like dusk no matter what time it is. The trail into the gorge isn't marked, just an old rail grade, overgrown and slick with moss. We hiked about 4 hours in, followed the river past a rusted-out bridge that leads nowhere, and found a clearing deep in the valley to set up camp. Things were good at first. We pitched our tents, built a fire, and cooked dinner on a flat stone. The boys joked around, drank a couple beers, and I told them stories about old mining towns swallowed by the mountains. Brandon, ever the skeptic, kept rolling his eyes. That first night, something woke me up just after midnight. I didn't hear anything at first. Just that kind of silence that's so complete, it hums. Then I heard Liam whispering outside my tent, but it wasn't a normal whisper. It was hoarse, broken, like someone who'd been crying or choking. I could only catch pieces. No, wait, don't. I unzipped my tent and looked out. Liam was standing about 20 feet from camp, facing the woods, shoulders hunched, barefoot on the cold dirt. I called his name. He didn't turn around. Then he said something that froze my blood. He said my name in my voice, not his, mine. I backed into my tent, zipped it shut, and grabbed my flashlight. When I opened it again, Liam was gone. The fire had died down, casting just enough glow to show the prints he'd left in the frost. I ran over to Brandon's tent and shook him awake. Liam didn't come back for almost an hour. When he finally emerged from the tree line, he looked confused, pale, his pupils huge. He didn't remember getting up, didn't remember walking away, swore he'd gone to bed, and the next thing he knew, I was shaking him awake. Brandon didn't believe him. Hell, I barely did. The next day, we tried to laugh it off. Maybe he'd sleepwalked. Maybe we were overtired. We packed up and moved further down the river, just to shake the mood. That second campsite felt different. There was no wind. The birds were gone. Even the bugs were quiet. The whole place felt watched. I figured maybe a bear or a cougar was nearby, so I kept my sidearm loaded and close. That night we built a huge fire and stayed up late, trying to shake the nerves. Liam was quieter than usual. Brandon was twitchy, kept checking over his shoulder. We all finally turned in around 1 a.m. And that's when things went to hell. I woke up to a scream. Brandon screamed. I bolted out of my tent, flashlight and pistol in hand, and found Brandon about 20 yards from camp, backing away from something. And it was me, standing there in the tree line was me. Same jacket, same hat, same boots, just standing dead still, staring at Brandon. "Don't shoot," it said. "It's me." But it wasn't my voice. It was off. Too slow, too smooth, like someone trying to sound like me. Then it grinned. The smile was too wide, too many teeth. I aimed my gun, but my hand was shaking so bad I didn't fire. The thing took a step forward, and then, like a flicker in a film reel, it was gone. Just gone. Liam came running up from the other side of camp. Said he saw Brandon walking toward the river. Only Brandon had never moved. That night we didn't sleep. We sat around the fire, weapons close, and every so often we'd hear something moving just beyond the tree line. Not walking. Stalking, like it was circling us. Once we heard it laugh. It sounded like all of us at once. We left at first light. We didn't eat, didn't talk. We just packed up and hiked out as fast as our legs would carry us. Every now and then, I swear, I heard something pacing alongside the trail. Always just far enough away that we couldn't see it. It followed us all the way out. When we got back to the truck, I drove straight to a gas station off Route 460, where we sat inside for hours just trying to feel human again. We didn't talk much after that. Liam moved to Asheville. Brandon never went camping again. I stayed in the mountains, but I don't go into the gorge anymore. And if I ever do, I won't go alone. Somewhere in those woods, something wears our faces. It doesn't just mimic us. It becomes us. And every once in a while, on cold nights when I'm in the forest alone, I'll hear my name whispered behind me, spoken in my own voice. I've spent the last 14 years working as a backcountry ranger in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. That means I've seen a lot, twisted ankles, black bear encounters, missing hikers who weren't actually missing. But nothing prepared me for what happened last fall near Big Hollow. It started with a radio call from dispatch. An off-grid hunter hadn't returned to his cabin near Cheat Mountain. According to his brother, the man, Greg Harlan, was an experienced woodsman, but he hadn't made contact in 3 days. Normally, we'd let a few more days pass before mounting a search, but there had been reports of strange noises in that area. Low-frequency moans echoing through the valleys. A few hikers reported hearing things in the fog-deep growls and something too big to be a bear. I volunteered to check it out. I left early, hiking in from the east, with the plan to make camp near Big Hollow and search the surrounding ridges in the morning. The hike in was uneventful, just how I like it: cool air, damp earth, rustling leaves, but even in daylight, something felt off. The deeper I got, the quieter the woods became. No birds. No squirrels. Just the sound of my boots and the occasional creak of wind through brittle trees. By the time I reached Big Hollow, the sun had dipped below the hills, and the valley was swallowed in shadow. I found the hunter's cabin just before dark, a small one-room structure with a metal chimney and a rusted propane tank. His truck was parked nearby, keys still in the ignition. Inside the cabin, his gear was all there: rifle, pack, half-eaten jerky, but no sign of him. I checked the perimeter and set up camp about 50 yards from the cabin. Figured I'd get a fresh start at dawn. That night, something circled my tent. At first, I thought it was a deer. I heard the crunch of leaves, the soft shifting of weight. But it moved differently, heavier, slower. It never came into view, just circled. And then it stopped. I lay there, frozen, every muscle locked tight. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on, and swept the beam outside the tent flap. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching. I barely slept. At first light, I packed up and started combing the hills. I found boot prints heading northeast from the cabin. I followed them for about 2 miles until they ended at a patch of churned earth, like something had scuffled violently. Tufts of deer hair were tangled in broken branches, and there were deep gouges in the bark, claw marks, far bigger than any black bear I'd ever seen. There was a low mist in the air. It settled in like a blanket, clinging to everything and muffling sound. That's when I started hearing the breathing, deep and wet, like something with fluid in its lungs. I stood perfectly still, scanning the trees, and then I saw it. It was standing just beyond the fog line, maybe 30 yards out, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, long arms, misshapen joints. It had antlers, huge branching things, but its face was all wrong, too human. Wide, empty eyes and a mouth that hung open like a corpse left in the sun too long. Its chest heaved as it sniffed the air, and then it moved fast. I fired once, missed. I turned and ran. The next 30 minutes were a blur of sprinting, stumbling, and blind crashing through brush. I heard it behind me, never close enough to see, but always close enough to feel. It howled once, this awful sound that vibrated inside my bones. Like metal scraping concrete mixed with a dying animal's last breath. Eventually, I lost it. Or maybe it let me go. I don't know how I made it back to the cabin. I locked the door, shoved furniture against it, and sat there with my rifle in my lap until morning. When I finally had the nerve to go outside, I saw that it had come back. Massive footprints circled the cabin. There were claw marks on the door. Something had whispered my name through the cracks in the wood sometime around 3 a.m. They found me 3 days later, after I didn't check in. I told them Greg was gone. There was no body, no blood, just the signs of something unnatural. The official report says Greg Harlan was lost to exposure, a common enough ending for these woods. But I know better. Whatever hunts up near Big Hollow isn't an animal. It isn't a bear or a wolf or some guy in a costume. It's real, and it knows our names. I've been working wilderness search and rescue out in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado for almost 11 years now. That means long hours, unpredictable weather, and terrain that can kill a man just as quick as a grizzly. But the worst thing about this job, the thing no one warns you about, is that sometimes the woods give you something back you were never supposed to find. And sometimes they don't give anything back at all. This happened in early October, a few years back. A solo hiker named Caleb Doran went missing near an area locals call Blood Rock Pass, a craggy stretch of high-altitude switchbacks that zigzag through scree and pine, with a reputation even older than the Forest Service. The name comes from an old mining disaster, or so people say. Half a dozen workers supposedly buried alive when a landslide took out a mule trail. But the locals talk about it like it's more than just a bad memory. They say something lives up there, something that sings when the wind dies. We don't put much stock in stories like that, not officially anyway, but Caleb was experienced. No history of medical issues. Solid GPS prep. He checked in with the ranger the morning he went up, told them he was headed through the pass and down to Copper Basin. 4 days later, he hadn't shown up at the station. We sent a small team out first, 2 SAR guys and a sheriff's deputy. They came back the next day looking pale. Said they found Caleb's gear, his tent, his pack, even his boots, just abandoned right there on the edge of the switchbacks. But no sign of him. No blood. No prints, just silence. They requested backup. I volunteered. I left the next morning with a pack, a radio, and a loaded 357. I'm not usually the paranoid type, but there was something about the way the deputy talked about that campsite that left me unsettled. He said it was like Caleb had just stepped out to take a leak and never came back, not dragged, not attacked, just gone. The hike up through the lower meadows was uneventful, but the moment I stepped onto the trail up to Blood Rock, the air changed. No birds, no squirrels. The wind died down, and a stillness settled in, thick as snow. That's when I heard it, not loud, not clear, but music, soft, distant, like a woman humming. Not singing, just a wordless melody. I stopped dead in my tracks. The sound was coming from up ahead, somewhere past the next bend. I called out, "Caleb, SAR search and rescue, hello?" Nothing. The humming stopped. I moved forward slowly, scanning the trail, one hand on the grip of my revolver. I turned the corner and found the site, just like they said. Tent unzipped, gear neatly arranged beside it, like someone had just stepped away, except the tent wasn't empty. Inside, on top of the sleeping bag, was a pair of socks, folded, clean. That's when the smell hit me. Not blood, not rot, something else. Sweet, almost chemical, like lavender and rust. I crouched by the tent and radioed in. "This is Unit 6. I've located the missing hiker's base camp. Still no sign of the subject. I'm going to continue toward the switchback. Over." No response. I tried again. Static. I stood up and looked toward the rocks above. Blood Rock isn't red like you'd think. It's this jagged gray shale, but at sunset it takes on this rust-colored sheen. The trail narrows up there. The drop on one side is nearly vertical, and if you're not careful, you'll lose your footing and never stop falling. I climbed slowly, one step at a time. The whole time I felt like I was being watched. That's not a feeling I get often, but that day, every sound echoed wrong. Every breeze felt like breath. And then, just before the next ridge, I saw something in the dirt. Bare footprints. No shoes, just one set. Leading up, they weren't Caleb's. They were too small, too narrow, almost delicate, like a woman's, but the weirdest thing, the prints were dry and warm. I followed them around the bend and found what I first thought was a body. I dropped to a knee, heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't Caleb. It was something else. The figure was curled into a fetal position on the edge of the rocks. Thin, pale skin stretched over a frail frame. No hair, no clothes, no gender. Just this blank, twitching shape, like a person molded from wax and left too long in the sun. Its limbs were wrong, too long, and its face was covered by a sheet of something like skin, taut and expressionless. It turned toward me. That's when I realized it didn't have eyes, but it could see me. It opened its mouth and let out a hum, the same tune I'd heard in the woods. I drew my gun and took a step back, my boots sliding slightly on the loose gravel. The thing twitched violently, once then stopped. The humming grew louder, but the creature didn't move its mouth. It wasn't humming. The mountain was. The rocks around us began to vibrate, just slightly, like there was something deep inside, thrumming. I turned and ran full speed down the pass, nearly losing my footing 3 times. The humming chased me, echoing through the stones. When I got back to the tent, it was gone. I mean everything. The tent, the gear, the pack, even the socks. All that was left were those same bare footprints, now leading away. I didn't stop running until I hit the trailhead. The official report says Caleb Doran died from a fall. Body never recovered. Case closed. But I know better. Something lives near Blood Rock, something old and quiet and hungry. It doesn't kill you like a bear or a mountain lion. It calls you. And if you answer, you don't come back. I've been a backcountry ranger in Washington State for over 15 years now. That's a lot of miles walked, a lot of campsites checked, and more weird stories from hikers than I can count. You do this job long enough, the wilderness stops feeling like a place you're in and starts to feel like a place you're borrowing from something else. But there's one story I've never told, not to my wife, not to my station chief, not even to the guys who joke about Bigfoot over beers after work, because this one wasn't just strange, it was wrong. It happened about 7 years ago, in early November. I was checking trailheads along the southern edge of Olympic National Park, places where the season was winding down, but hikers still slipped in. Most folks are smart. They stick to the marked trails, camp where they're supposed to, and pack out what they bring in. But I'd gotten a report about an illegal fire ring set up somewhere off McKay Ridge Trail. A hunter had seen the smoke the day before and thought it looked like someone camping up near Deeper Hollow. Now, Deeper Hollow isn't on any map, and for good reason. It's a dip in the forest, a little basin where the trees seem to grow tighter and taller than anywhere else. The wind doesn't move down there. Birds don't sing, and every ranger who's ever patrolled the area has said the same thing. It just feels off. I set out around noon, packed light, radio, sidearm, thermos of coffee. The hike in was slow. The fog had settled into the ridge lines like soup, and everything past 30 feet looked like it was underwater. I found boot tracks about 3 miles in, fresh ones veering off trail toward the hollow. I followed them. The deeper I went, the quieter it got, like the woods were sucking sound out of the air. No wind, no branches creaking, just the sound of my boots on the soft earth. By the time I reached the basin, the light was starting to dim. It was maybe 3:30, but the trees were packed so tightly overhead that it looked closer to dusk. That's when I saw the camp, and I knew something was wrong immediately. The tent was one of those cheap blue pop-ups you get at Walmart, way too thin for late-season cold. There was a fire ring, sure, but it wasn't warm. Ashes were stone cold. No gear nearby, no pack, no food. Just a tent, and what looked like a sleeping bag inside. I called out, "Hello, park ranger. Anyone here?" No answer. I stepped closer, unbuttoning the strap on my holster. Something about the air felt off, heavy, stagnant. I crouched by the tent and peeled the flap open. There was someone in the bag, or something. At first I thought it was a man, curled up tightly, but then I saw the way the limbs were bent too many joints. The bag was zipped up to the top, but the face sticking out wasn't right. The skin was pale, waxy, stretched tight. The eyes were open, glassy, but the mouth was moving, not open, not talking, just slowly shaping into a grin. I stumbled back, pulling my weapon and radio at the same time. I pressed the button. "This is Ranger North. I've located the illegal camp near Deeper Hollow. There's a body here, unknown subject. I don't think he's alive. Requesting backup and med evac. Over." Static. I moved away from the tent, trying to find higher ground for a signal, when I heard it. Snap, dot, dot. Behind me. I turned, weapon raised. Nothing. Reduce. I scanned the trees, heart pounding, when I heard another noise, a voice, whispering. At first I couldn't make it out, then it got clearer. It was my name. Over and over. "Daniel, Daniel," I called out, voice cracking. "Who's there?" The whisper stopped. Then, 20 feet ahead, I saw someone step out from behind a tree. It was me, dot, dot, same ranger uniform, same hat, same beard. But the thing wearing my face wasn't right. Its skin was gray. Eyes pitch black. Its mouth opened too wide, and it screamed. Not a human scream. A ripping, high-pitched wail that vibrated in my bones. I fired twice. The thing jerked, stumbled, and vanished into the trees like smoke. I turned and ran. Branches whipped past me. The fog had thickened again, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs were on fire, until I couldn't hear the thing behind me anymore. I stumbled into a clearing I didn't recognize and collapsed against a fallen log. I stayed there, shaking, until the sun started to rise. When I finally found my way back to the trailhead, it was nearly noon. I called in. Backup arrived an hour later. I told them I got lost in the fog and that the camp was empty when I arrived. I said I must have imagined the face in the bag. They believed me. Or they pretended to. Later, I went back. The tent was gone. No sleeping bag, no ashes, no tracks, like nothing had ever been there. I don't go near Deeper Hollow anymore, not because I'm afraid of dying, but because I know it knows me now, and it wears my face when it walks.